Hello everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Enjoy the fanfic, and let's begin part 1. People scrambled through the streets frantically. Civilians bumped and pushed against each other as parents collected their children from out of the streets. Store owners quickly closed up shop and people began turning off the lights in their houses. Parents cuddled up with their confused children in their beds. It was obvious, the fear of the people that spread throughout the hidden village known as Konoha. It only happened on nights like this, the night that people cowered in their houses and children laid underneath their beds. It was nights like this that horror stories were born. It was nights like this that parents tell scary stories to their children to make them behave. It was only on nights like this, when the moon was red with blood. Today was October the 10th, exactly 10 years ago, the village had been attacked and nearly destroyed by a vicious monster, the Kyuubi no Yoko, the nine-tailed demon fox. Husbands lost wives, wives lost husbands, children lost parents, parents lost children, loved ones lost other loved ones. It was truly a one-of-a-kind of days that Konoha could remember in its history. However, it was thanks to Konoha's hero, their Yondaime Hokage, that the village was spared from further destruction. Be that as it may, there was a price. Along with the defeat of the Kyuubi was the death of the Yondaime Hokage. So every year people would raise their glasses in reverence to their savior who had kept their village safe from destruction. However, what was that supposed to do with the pent-up hatred? Hatred for the unfair loss of family members and lost ones. Oh, fortunately there was an answer for that too. How convenient that every elder or adult within Konoha's walls had learned the truth from Konoha's Sandaime that the Yondaime had given his life to not destroy the Kyuubi, but rather seal it inside if a small, infant child. Oh, what a joy it was to anyone that they had something, anything to take their frustrations out on. Like a small animal, the child had a harsh life like one of a cage. Effectively being ostracized by his fellow village members, he bore the full brunt of their disdain for his existence. Like an animal, he was cornered many times. Unspeakable things had been done to him. One thing more worse than the last. Things done to effectively break him were uncountable. However, the thing about animals, once cornered, they usually bite back. It was slow and deliberate at first. It happened on his 6th year. Slowly, but surely his eyes lost their innocence. Slowly people around him started disappearing. Slowly he began to ignore the village, always mumbling to himself. He had the smallest of smiles on his face during those times. It irritated the villagers that this thing was happy. Nothing they did could break it anymore. They did not know why. Slowly, they became afraid of the child. Never did they imagine that their hatred would return itself at them. A thick mist fell over the village in the dead of night. People lay asleep in their beds, but those who were awake trembled in fright. The reason was because there was a spirit, a very angry spirit roaming through the streets of Konoha. Even now people shivered and cried softly as feet trudged through the streets of Konoha. Each step like the creeping of stairs of a person's house. Then there was the sound of something heavy being dragged through the ground. The villagers prayed for whatever god to save them. No one could see it, but slowly a body came into view. It was his body. As he walked through the streets, his features came into definition. The figure wore a bright orange jumpsuit. His head was bathed with a sea of blonde hair. On the sides of his face were 3 terribly defining whisker marks. How appropriate for what he contained. His once light blue eyes, which made one feel as if they were swimming in a wide ocean of calm, had now shown a freezing darkness that could do nothing but consume the soul. None could make out his body from the fog. None dared to try and look out their windows to do so. As he walked, the sounds of chains came from being dragged across the ground. The chains protruded from his backside. They dragged themselves across the ground, leaving their mark as he walked through the village. No one seems to be out today, Ka-chan, he spoke with a small smile. It was then that he heard a dark, twisted chuckle escape from the lips of someone so close to him inside of his mind. That is okay, Sochi. It seems they are finally learning Databane. You have made your mother so proud. Oh wait, I sense one. Go to your left, honey. The voice inside his head spoke. The young blonde nodded and quickly finished his walk through the village. Quickly turning to the left, he dashed off across the rooftops before finally landing on one of the rooftops. Please man, let's go home, damn it. I don't want to be out here tonight. It's going to kill us. The young blonde took notice of 3 men. Each held a kunai and one large Fuma shuriken in his hands. Shut up. Go the home if you're scared, but I'm staying. I'm going to kill whatever the hell this thing is. It might just be the damn demon brat. We will kill him when we see him. Why Hokage-sama left him alive I will never know, but I won't stand for it anymore. If you want to leave then leave now. He said. Naruto narrowed his eyes before hands trembled. Do it Sochi. Do it for me. Do it for us, she said. She would protect him. She wouldn't let them harm him. No, just like him, she was broken. She didn't have a desire to live, her only desire was vengeance. A rightful revenge for the hell they put her son through. Her son's shattered mind was what gave her purpose. None of it mattered. Naruto grinned widely before he dropped to the ground. What was that? One of the men asked. The other two gulped and jumped back as they heard a trash can being knocked over. Come out and fight, he shouted. Soon all three heard chuckling. A dark, twisted, malicious laugh that filled the night air. Its sound literally driving the men to the edge of their sanity. Tick-tock, tick-tock, the clock winds down. There is a child with a lasting frown. Keep me safe. Keep me near. I have something for you to fear. Hey. The three quickly flinched before they took notice of the figure slowly appearing from the mist. His form was easily recognizable to the three before one of the men hollered. I knew it was you. Die demon brat. He shouted and with a flick of his wrist he hurled the large Fuma shuriken towards the young blonde's locations. The young teen didn't move his body while the man's grin quickly came across his face. The shuriken went closer and closer. The sounds of an impact were heard while the trio of men laughed loudly. Told you guys it was easy. Now let's get out of here, he said and the others agreed. However, they quickly noticed that the mist was beginning to clear. They continued to hear footsteps. The footsteps grew louder and more apparent. Each seemed to echo across the alleyway where they were standing before they noticed the young man come into existence, and the sight made them gasp. Wrapped in a large, white chain was the Fuma shuriken that the man just threw. The chain wrapped itself like a snake around the shuriken, tightening it in its death grip before the shuriken shattered in pieces across the ground. The young man chuckled slowly, his fingers cracking from his flexing them at various times. The chains that protruded from his back danced around his body sensually. Like snakes, they captivated the men who had no idea of the terror just unleashed upon them. It is a good night, Sochi. Happy birthday, the voice said, and quickly one chain lit up in fire, the second lit up in lightning, the third in water, and the last in wind. The chains continued to dance around his body before they suddenly dashed forward. The men gasped as they tried to jump away. The chains bashed into the ground. Naruto chuckled as he watched the men dance around the chains for their lives. Arigato ka-chan. This is the best birthday ever. He snickered. The feminine voice suddenly grew a large grin. Both willed the chains expertly and watched as one chain wrapped around the leg of the leader. The fire chain burned his flesh, making him scream. People in their houses whimpered at the poor soul. No. Stop. Let me go. Let me go. He shouted. Quickly the man's accomplices grabbed him by the arm. It pleased both the young man and the female in his head at the sight. Yes, for too long her son had been the one to cower in fear of having no protection. Now was this ungrateful village's turn. The chains retracted, drawing the man into the air. He shouted as the four chains grabbed the four corners of his body. Each of the element-powered chains did something different to his body. Unspeakable things. By his arms and his legs was he grabbed. Naruto held his hand into the air and slowly clutched it into a fist. The chains slowly tightened agonizingly. The man's blood-curdling cries went on deaf ears as his friends cowered in a corner. The people listening in their houses prayed to Kami for the spirit to pass over them. The blonde's laughter suddenly stopped. Rensa Q, chain binding coffin, Naruto spoke. Quickly more chains sprang from his back and slowly, but deliberately wrapped themselves around the man's form, encasing him in white light. The feminine voice smiled brightly before folding her arms. She would do as her son commanded, all the while protecting him as she wanted to. The man's screaming were silenced as a chain wrapped around his mouth. His eyes were now crying as tears stained the ground, not that the young man saw them, and even if he did, he wouldn't care. Rensa Sogi, chain buried funeral, Naruto called. The chains twisted and turns. The snap of bones were heard, bringing excruciating pain. The young teen and his mother watched as the blood seeped from his body, for the chain snapped once more. The chains arched his arms back and his legs downward. His chest rose upwards. Fire and lightning trailed across the chains before encasing the body in a vicious light. He didn't turn his eyes away. The men widened their eyes as they heard the sickening snap of their friend's backside, signifying a broken spine. Slowly the light dissipated while the chains unraveled and dropped the body to the ground. The blonde grinned before slowly turning back to the other two. Please, let us go home. We won't bother you again, one of them stammered, and the other nodded his head so quickly it would have appeared that he gave himself a whiplash. However, both shivered as they quickly saw him stop smiling as his features grew into a frown. He closed his eyes for but a second before opening them up. You should not have bothered him a first time. I know you won't bother my son again, because I'll make sure that you never do it again, Databane, the feminine voice said from the blonde's voice. The chains rose into the air, and before the two men could even shout, engulfed them both. Their silent screams, cries, and tears went unheard by the village known as Konoha. The young man walked out of the alley, the chains dripping with blood. He chuckled darkly while the female chuckled in the same tone. I will always protect you, Sochi, the feminine voice spoke. The blonde smiled and quickly nodded before he vanished into the mist, his form never being seen by anyone or anything. It was such a shame that this night passed unlike the last one. Oh, how he had hoped for some entertainment. I know, Ka-chan. I will protect you as well, he said before he disappeared, and then so did the mist. It was just another October. Another birthday for Uzumaki Naruto, Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yoko. Next morning, he wondered how long he had been doing this job. Going through 3 great shinobi wars had to take its toll on a person. Governing the village that was Konohagakure no Sato, that was so much work. Now that he thought about it, when his sensei had named him the Sandaime Hokage over his partners and teammates Hiruzen, Sarutobi wondered just how he would be able to keep the village going, but he had done it. He had kept Konoha standing tall as best he could. All his life was filled with the making of tough decisions. These were decisions that pushed his psyche to the very edge of his morality and back again. He could see the horror-stricken face of his people as he walked through the public streets for the first time in a while. Right behind him were 2 Anbu guards flanking his sides. As he walked, time seemed to show its control over the Sandaime Hokage. The wrinkles of his face due to age, sleepless nights, and times of sheer worry were showing their toll on him. He really was getting too old for this job. That's what he thought when he saw people hesitantly starting to put up their signs and open their shops. Children were slowly starting to play in the streets. Sarutobi sighed. 3 casualties. That's 3 casualties that the Anbu have discovered yesterday. While it's not as bad as last year, it's still unnerving. Naruto-kun, you were monitored for those entire 24 hours by my Anbu. They would have reported him missing, and yet the council believe that you are responsible for all of this. How did it come to this? Sarutobi wondered to himself. Well, actually he knew how it came to this. He knew how he, indirectly, had broken the young boy's soul. He knew oh so well. Leaving the village behind, Hiruzen and his 2 Anbu quickly went about 2 or 3 miles out and came to a small facility. Hiruzen opened its doors. He descended its steps. While the facility might not look very big on the outside, the same was not the case for it on the inside. Inside was a large series of stairs, rooms, and medical facilities. This was Konoha's correctional facility, or as rumored by the civilians, Konoha's hospital for the mentally disturbed. Finally Hiruzen came to the end of the many halls, each light flickering on and off as his Anbu stayed close behind him. Right now, he was down to the lower levels of the facility, which happened to be level 7. Sarutobi finally made his stop and looked into a room through the glass. There, sitting in a deathly white room, was Uzumaki Naruto, Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yoko. The Anbu remained still as they watched the blonde. His mouth seemed to be moving. It was like he was carrying a conversation with someone, but they didn't know who since he was alone. Suddenly Naruto laughed and shook his head back and forth. His head banged against the wall slightly, making Hiruzen narrow his eyes. How long has he been here? Sarutobi asked sorrowfully. The Anbu to his left and right glanced to each before turning back towards the Sandaime. They looked past him at the glass where Naruto seemed to be sitting. He was talking to himself again and laughing all the same. We have monitored him for the last 24 hours, Hokage-sama. We have replaced the shifts constantly at your orders. Naruto Uzumaki has not left this room yesterday, the day before that, or the month before that, the left Anbu spoke in a feminine voice. Sarutobi sighed with a nod. He just didn't understand. 3 deaths on October the 10th and Naruto was in this room the whole time. Maybe it was all just one big coincidence. It had to be, didn't it? There was just no way that, with the changing of the guards, could Naruto ever make it out of his cell. Sarutobi didn't know why he couldn't. Open the door, Sarutobi said, narrowing his elderly eyes at the sight. Hokage-sama, with all due respect, do you really think that's wise? One of our specialized Yamanaka members still hasn't shown progress in dealing with Naruto-san. We don't know how he will react to your presence, the male spoke this time. Hiruzen quickly frowned at the way the Anbu phrased those words. For once, he didn't know what to do. Meanwhile, inside his room, his no open doors, completely white, totally not insane mind-inducing room, Naruto was indeed smiling and laughing. Only Hiruzen couldn't possibly have known that inside of the blonde's mind was another laughing voice. And then remember when he said, Please don't hurt me. I don't want to die. He shook like a leaf, clutching his kunai while the tears dropped from his face. It was amazing. Databane. Naruto heard and then he proceeded to laugh. That was the best part, Ka-chan. Naruto said. He didn't notice the Hokage and the Anbu looking at him in sheer worry. No, Sochi. The best part was when he actually tried to throw the kunai at you. I blocked him from hurting you and then crushed his windpipe. Hehehehe ha ha ha. His mother laughed. Naruto finally couldn't take it and laughed. He quickly clutched his sides and dropped to the ground, kicking his feet into the air. Inside of the blonde Jinchuriki's mind, the same was happening with a middle-aged looking woman. Her vibrant red hair flew down nearly past her waistline. She wore a high-collared, sleeveless blouse under a long, loose-fitting dress. Her hair spiraled out over the sewer-like mindscape of Naruto Uzumaki. Her violet eyes, when she opened them, were easy to ascertain. She was broken. She was just as broken as Naruto Uzumaki. Losing herself to whatever was too horrible to bear that she mentally couldn't cope with it. As she laughed, she clutched her sides. She was having so much fun it was painful. This was Kushina Uzumaki, former Jonin of Konohagakure, former Anbu captain of Konoha's Anbu Black Ops, former Jinchuriki of Kyuubi no Yoko, and former wife of the Yondaime Hokage, and current mother of Uzumaki Naruto. Kushina, if she cared to review her life, had no way of knowing how she ended up inside the seal. Something must have gone wrong with the sealing formula, because when Kushina had opened her eyes, she was not with her husband the Yondaime Hokage. She was inside a dark, wet place. Kushina wandered the sewer-like place for hours during that time that she had awoken. She kept walking and walking until she finally stopped. Kushina had wondered how long she had been walking through the halls. Days, months, years. She wasn't sure, but now she was tired of walking. Once she had figured that she wasn't going anywhere, she had taken a deep breath. She then took the time to relax and figure these things out. Pulling up some chakra that she had mustered, she was able to extend her senses to the outside world. She was able to see and experience all things. It felt good, and yet, she had been at the wrong place at the wrong time and in the wrong body when she saw it. Kushina experienced what her son experienced. She widened her eyes to the shouts of ambient threats to her person. She felt severe pain. It was an unbearable pain. One that, when she shouted, made her lungs burn from extended use. It was terrible, horrible, her mind couldn't comprehend it. However, soon, she blacked out. Hours later, Kushina woke up only to feel something heavy on her lap. The pain was gone. Leaning up, she looked down and widened her eyes to the familiar mess of spiky blonde hair. The hair that she had only 5 years ago seen on her son. It was her fault. This was her fault. She was able to feel all the things Naruto experienced. It twisted her mind, destroyed her from the inside. Her only sanity was keeping her son safe. She had to keep just enough sane to be with him. They were insane together. Kushina was inside of her son and she couldn't take it. Behind her happy laughter and bright eyes were the eyes and smile of a broken woman and mother, whose only purpose was to protect her son. She had to, if he died. Kushina finished laughing and leaned up before shaking her head. She then looked through her son's eyes and her smile widened. Oh Sochi, don't look now, but we have guests. Kushina exclaimed. Naruto finished laughing before looking at the one-sided window. If he was looking at it then he saw nothing but endless darkness, but his senses reached far past the glass and he saw the outline of the Hokage and two Anbu. Gigi, I see you. Naruto called out with a laugh. Hiruzen and the Anbu stiffened while Kushina smiled. Why not invite him in? It'll be fun. Kushina said, never breaking the smile on her face. Naruto quickly nodded, not one to disobey his mother or her wishes. He would do anything for her. Anything. Standing to his feet, Naruto quickly rushed to the window and let out his widest smile as he put himself on display for Sarutobi along with the male and female Anbu. Come in Gigi. Ka-chan said, you'll be fun. Come on. Naruto called out. Hiruzen frowned behind the glass while the two Anbu narrowed their eyes behind their masks. The Anbu unconsciously took a step back in slight worry. Naruto's grin never dropped from his face while Sarutobi sighed. How are you feeling, Naruto? Sarutobi decided to ask. Kushina and Naruto raised their eyebrow before Kushina stood to her feet. Ah, he's worried about us, Sochi. We're fine, aren't we? We're like two cuts of beef swimming in Kami's ramen. Kushina said. It was silent for a moment. Suddenly Hiruzen watched Naruto laugh loudly as he dropped to the ground again, clutching his side at some unknown joke. Naruto, please answer the question, Sarutobi pleaded. Slowly Kushina and Naruto stopped laughing. Kushina leaned up while Naruto got to his feet. Nay Gigi, where is Anbu Nichan that likes to play with Ka-chan inside my head? Ka-chan said that they were such good friends. What happened to him? Naruto asked, tilting his head to the side. Sarutobi winced while Kushina laughed. We were such happy friends. I remember when we had to play hide and seek. He hid and I looked for him. It was so fun how he was so shocked every time I found him. Why, I remember when he tried sparring with me when he pulled out a kunai. It was so funny how he pretended that his leg was broken when I snapped it. He was a good actor, Databane. Kushina laughed to herself. Naruto merely smiled widely. She misses him, Gigi, Naruto said before Sarutobi sighed. He shook his head while Naruto tilted his head to the side. It's a shame I still can't see you, Gigi. I miss you, Naruto called out. Hiruzen frowned before turning back towards the Anbu. The Anbu frowned before sighing. They truly didn't know what to do. Sarutobi also knew that what he was about to do was going to push him to the very edge of his duties as a Hokage to his village, but none of the evidence pointed to Naruto, so the blonde was stable for the most part. He hoped it had to be done. There was no way around it. So long as Naruto had a handler of sorts, then it might be okay. Naruto-kun, how would you like to get out of there? Hiruzen asked, and Naruto suddenly blinked fast. Kushina blinked just as fast. It was obvious that neither was expecting those words. Everyone watched tensely as Naruto backed away from the window. His fingers clenched and then unclenched again. He walked around his room pacing the floor. In his mind, Kushina appeared to be doing the same thing. Sochi, ask him my question, Kushina spoke with a wide smile. Naruto equally grinned and spoke to the mirror. Do we get ramen? Naruto asked. Sarutobi frowned at the unusual request, but he figured that Naruto wouldn't just be able to see him nod, so he answered. Yes, Naruto-kun, you will get ramen, Sarutobi said, and Kushina frowned, as did Naruto. Ka-chan gets ramen too. Naruto's mood suddenly changed as he snarled angrily. Sarutobi and the Anbu unconsciously reached for their weapons from the tone before they heard the request. Kushina fell back in laughter and clutched her sides. It was just so funny. Too funny to not laugh. Meanwhile Naruto, hearing the laughter in his head, laughed as well, getting a face-splitting smile which made Hiruzen relax, sort of. Very well, Naruto-kun. Ka-chan gets ramen too. However, Naruto-kun, you must cooperate with us. You will attend Konoha's academy and you will be given a handler. You must stay with your handler at all times. Do you agree? Sarutobi asked readily. Now Hiruzen wasn't a fool. He knew who Naruto's parents were, and he also knew that if they could see the blonde now, well, he just hoped that they never would. Especially not the blonde's true mother. If Kushina ever learned of this, then Sarutobi didn't know what would happen. Kushina, hearing Sarutobi reply, nodded her agreement before announcing it. She wouldn't have her son kill anyone, in broad daylight. Oh, okay, fine. Kushina wouldn't have her son kill anyone who didn't attack them. In broad daylight. Explaining her terms to her son, Naruto quickly agreed. He stopped in the middle of the room and took a deep breath. Finally, in a surprise of speed, Naruto bashed his face into the mirror between him, Sarutobi, and the Anbu with a grin that could only send a shiver down their spines. I agree, Gigi. Ka-chan agrees too. We will behave, we promise. Naruto said sweetly and truthfully. The Sandaime wasn't even sure that he could buy those words, but this had to come to pass. Hiruzen shook his head in agreement, though Naruto couldn't see it, but the sound of fingers snapping helped him focus his attention. Bring me Kazuna-san, Sarutobi said. One of the Anbu quickly nodded before they dashed away. Naruto grinned widely in the direction that he felt the Anbu had left in. In the meantime, Naruto and Kushina would continue to make jokes with each other as they laughed together. Only in the eyes of the Anbu were Naruto's echoing laughter into the walls of his white room. His insane, broken laughter. After about 10 minutes, Kushina alerted Naruto to the third Anbu in the room. Hi Anbu-chan. Naruto called out. Hiruzen and the now third Anbu frowned, but the Anbu didn't respond, merely looking on with slight disinterest. Kazuna-san, come with me, Sarutobi said, and the two walked off, leaving Naruto alone with the other two Anbu. The two looked at Naruto in only slight worry. How could the council want this person out? What was the good of Konoha in letting him out? Nay, Anbu Nichan, want to see a trick? Naruto asked, cackling to the two still in the room with him. Kushina smiled in turn, knowing her son's thoughts. Kushina chuckled softly, darkly, cruelly. It was much too funny to not chuckle this way. Over in another room, the Anbu Kazuna and the Sandaime Hokage were softly talking about this predicament. Kazuna, you know how important this is, but I need your complete and utter honesty. Off the record here, what do you think about this? Sarutobi asked, and Kazuna sighed. They then sat on a seat and placed their masked face into their hands. With all due respect, Hokage-sama, you and the council are making me question the safety of the village. Hokage-sama, he is not sane. He's so far from it, actually. If even one of this facility's best evaluation members couldn't help him, then what good is there to him going out? I truly think he should stay in here. Not for what he holds, but, rather for what he is now, they said calmly. Sarutobi couldn't help but agree. Whenever he saw Naruto, his heart sank lower and lower into a pit of sadness. Whenever he heard Naruto speak, his heart felt like it was being crushed. However, as the leader of the village, he had to stand firm with his decisions. Even with this one. Thank you, Kazuna-san. I'm pleased that you feel the same way. However, you must understand that things are being set in motion, and I know we need Naruto-kun to be ready. The Yondaime wished for him to be hero. Now I don't know, but I will not waste his legacy like this, Sarutobi answered. Kazuna slowly nodded before they stood back to their feet. I understand, Hokage-sama. I shall do my duty, Kazuna answered, prompting Sarutobi to hold out his hand. Your mask, Kazuna-san, you won't be needing it for a while. I trust you to understand that being his handler is sufficiently an S-rank mission. No harm should come to him or others while you are in his care. You will watch him, take him to the academy. If he does anything strange, then restrain him and take him home. For now you will be named Tsubaki, Jonin of Konohagakure, Sarutobi said. Kazuna quickly nodded, taking the name Tsubaki before removing their mask and placing it in the Hokage's hand. For the first part, Kazuna was female. She had dark eyes and long black hair which she wore braided down her back with jaw-length bangs framed on each side of her face. Tsubaki watched the Hokage discard her mask before preparing the standard green Chunin flak jacket and Konoha headband. I will give you the time to get changed, Sarutobi said, quickly leaving and closing the door. Tsubaki looked down at her new uniform and sighed longingly. She could tell that this was going to be an awkward chapter in her life. When Sarutobi returned, he knew instantly that something was wrong. Naruto was on his back laughing maniacally while the Anbu seemed stiffened in place. The male Anbu seemed to have actually frozen from a sight that no doubt he shouldn't have seen, and the female Anbu wasn't doing much better. Both stood dead in their tracks while Naruto snickered impishly. Naruto-kun, it's time to go, Sarutobi said, and Naruto slowly stopped laughing. Kushina, who had been laughing as well, stopped and frowned. She leaned up and cleared her throat. It was actually starting to get sore from all the laughing. Sore. Maybe sour. Sour grapes. Grapefruit. Fruit punch. Sore punch. Databane. Kushina stated excitedly. Naruto snickered, but he decided not to laugh this once. There would be plenty of time for that after this. Well, maybe if this handler bored them, then they could just as easily play with them as well. Okay, Gigi. Naruto said, getting to his feet. The doors unlocked. Now nothing separated the Hokage from Naruto as the two looked at each other. Hiruzen stared into the wide, broken eyes that were once a bright shade of blue. Hiruzen, Naruto and the two stiffened Anbu walked the halls of the ward. Climbing up the countless stairs out of the hole where the blonde was just a few minutes ago buried in, the group of four heard the sounds of people laughing, groaning or screaming at nothing. Sarutobi and the Anbu chose to ignore it, but Naruto laughed at them all. Kushina suddenly decided she wanted to do handstands and quickly did just that. Her hair splashed in the water while she stood on her hands, the blood rushing into her head. What kind of word is databane? Dat is dates and bane is banana. Dates that taste like bananas. I want a date, Kushina exclaimed, slightly laughing at her own joke. Finally, after the minutes rolled by unceremoniously, the group of four came out to the front of the ward where Naruto took notice of the people looking at him strangely. The blonde only smiled widely before sticking out his tongue to them all. Naruto-kun, behave, Sarutobi said, and Naruto slipped his tongue back inside his mouth. Naruto smiled slightly before his eyes focused upon the woman, Tsubaki, formerly known as Kazuna, sitting with her hands on her lap quietly. The four made their way to her and then Sarutobi spoke. Naruto-kun, this will be your handler. Her name is Suaki and she will shadow you. Please behave as best you can. Tsubaki will protect you if anyone tries to harm you, okay? Sarutobi asked. Naruto's smile suddenly flew downward while Kushina proceeded to do the same. No, she won't protect you. I will protect you, Sochi. You will never be hurt again as long as I am around. I love you, Sochi, Kushina said smoothly. Naruto's wide smile lessened until it came to a semi-normal one. You too, Ka-chan. I will protect you too. I promise. Naruto spoke mentally before he noticed Tsubaki stand to her feet. Naruto-kun, we have found an apartment for you to live in. Tsubaki-san will live right next door to you. Go to her for anything that you need. However, if you wish to go out, then you must tell her and wait for her so she can go with you. Tsubaki will pick up your books, materials, and any other supplies that you need. After this, then you will be instated into the academy tomorrow morning. I know this will be a strange adjustment, but do the best that you can, Sarutobi said, and Naruto grinned widely. The blonde's red-haired mother matched the grin. Oh, we'll be on our best behavior, databane, Kushina replied. Naruto merely kept the Anbu, Tsubaki and Hiruzen, in suspense with his smile, but they all took it as acknowledgement of the Hokage's orders. Seeing her opportunity, Tsubaki made her way, slowly, towards Naruto. She hoped that the smile on her face was disarming, but then again she didn't know what to expect. It's good to meet you, Naruto-kun. Let's have a productive relationship, she said, smiling. Naruto smiled widely, but it was entirely for a different reason. You smell funny. You smell like Anbu-chan who just appeared those moments ago, Naruto said. Tsubaki's smile never left her face, but the curves of her mouth twitched in response. Hiruzen narrowed his eyes behind Naruto's form while the two Anbu to his side stiffened. Hi, that would be me, Naruto-kun. I trust that you will not tell anyone this information, correct? Tsubaki asked. If she had planned for no secrets to be between the two of them, then she would first have to make the commitment to such a thing herself. As mentally unstable as he was, Tsubaki hoped that he would more find it funny and discard it, never to bring it up again. Naruto nodded his agreement before he followed Tsubaki out of the facility. Hiruzen and his Anbu watched them leave. The Sandaime hoped for Konoha's sake that this was just what the blonde needed to get back on his feet. He could only hope that this didn't come back to bite them. With Naruto and Tsubaki, Tsubaki kept a close eye on the handily right next to her. The stares of people the day after October the 10th were easily recognizable. Strange how all the time he had been underground in a cell people still recognized him by his blonde hair and his whisker marks. Well, given the fact that no other blonde in the village had hair anywhere as blonde as his, nor his whisker marks made that a much more defining characteristic than Tsubaki thought Naruto needed. She saw him grinning widely. Not in the least bit unnerved by anyone and their whispering. His body was shivering unnaturally. Spider, spider, on the wall, how much blood can you eat before you fall? Naruto suddenly asked. Tsubaki frowned quickly at the mentioning of his words. Forget getting the supplies first. Tsubaki had to get him out of the street. Naruto-kun, we're almost there. Stay calm, Tsubaki said as quietly as she could, prompting Naruto to continue as he trudged his feet. Inside the seal, Kushina chuckled at the reactions that she saw. Spider, spider, on the wall, the flies you see are the ones that will fall, Kushina thought to herself. She then snickered to herself, her body quickly shivering in a hidden excitement to match her son's. The smirk across Kushina's face fell slowly. The smirk on Naruto's face fell slowly. He could feel the eyes of everyone on his person. Their eyes judging him, condemning him, accusing him. Tsubaki narrowed her eyes once she noticed that Naruto stopped walking. Tsubaki quickly stopped as well. Fire. Lots and lots of fire. Burn. Let it burn. Burn it all to the ground. He won't make it. The white masks. Groups of 10s and 20s, Naruto whispered. Inside the mindscape, Kushina wasn't faring any better. Kushina shivered uncontrollably. Too many people. There were too many people. So much blood. Too much blood. Kushina's grin returned. Protect my son from all harm. Protect my son from all harm, Databane. I will protect my son, Kushina thought to herself. The ex-Anbu stiffened slightly. Naruto's eyes stared wide at his feet. His finger flexed irregularly. They clenched, unclenched, and then clenched again. Naruto shivered uncontrollably. None of the civilians noticed it, but Tsubaki could feel the chakra slowly pouring off Naruto's body. The civilians continued to murmur in blissful ignorance. No one noticed the 4 chains slowly beginning to protrude from his backside. Shit, Tsubaki thought to herself. Quickly deciding that the safety of the people outweighed her own safety, she flew into Naruto's personal space, quickly swept him off his feet, and then proceeded to dash across the rooftops. The civilians watched her disappear in a burst of speed until there was nothing left to see. Tsubaki forcefully pushed down her wand to clench her teeth from her mistake. Okay. It's still okay. I can still control this. Naruto-kun is not able to be around crowds of people for a certain amount of time. I must remember that, Tsubaki thought to herself. Naruto chuckled swiftly. The stares were gone. The malice was gone as well. There was nothing except the wind in his hair and the sun on his face. Tsubaki watched as the chains disappeared. She breathed a sigh of relief. Inside, Kushina fell to her knees and huffed. The sweat dropped from her face slowly. In a short time, Kushina picked herself up off the floor and leaned against the wall. A sound started off small, but then it started to grow, Kushina's laughter at the events that just transpired. Naruto could hear Kushina's laughter and didn't relent in laughing with her. He kicked high feet in Tsubaki's arms, getting the woman to glance at him. He seemed to be back to normal, or at least what was supposed to be normal for him. Well, he was tame at least. For Tsubaki, that's all that mattered at the moment. Complex. Tsubaki quickly dropped down to a large apartment complex. Despite its size, however, there was only a handful of people living there. All of them shinobi and all of them with the single mission, help Tsubaki in handling Naruto Uzumaki. A good thing about this area was that it wasn't as populated as a lot of other places. There shouldn't be anything else like that to happen here. And yet, Tsubaki was reluctant to even let Naruto's feet touch the ground. She didn't know why at all. We're here, Naruto-kun, Tsubaki said. Naruto didn't give any indication that he heard her words as he just continued to snicker to himself. Who could understand the insane? Tsubaki pushed open the doors and looked towards the landlord of the apartment. Coming to the counter, the landlord looked up and steeled his eyes. Tsubaki did the same, slowly nodding her head. The landlord nodded back and took a look at the young man in her arms. He wasn't shivering nearly as much as before, but the plastered grin on his face told them both all they needed to know. Did you encounter any troubles? He asked. Tsubaki frowned and took the chance to blink before sighing. Somewhat. He's all right for the most part. I made the error of thinking he could keep himself together enough to get to the complex. I was wrong. He's not capable of dealing with large crowds of people, Tsubaki answered. The man nodded and sighed as well. It's to be expected, I guess. Well, take him to his room. While you get his supplies, we will keep him safe and keep an eye on him, he said, standing to his feet. His eyes held a stern expression. He had a firm jawline and tight body. His clothes hugged his body in a strange way, but it wasn't. Top of his head consisted of brown hair spread over his face. He bore the standard Anbu tattoo on his right arm. Well, he's stable now. Thank you, Tsubaki answered. The landlord quickly nodded before handing her the keys. Tsubaki quickly walked up the stairs and turned to Naruto's apartment. Skillfully, she placed the keys in the door and opened it without dropping him. The place was clean, Tsubaki could see, and it had the essentials. A refrigerator, stove, table and a few chairs, a small bed with clean sheets, a closet, and separate room for the bathroom and shower, and a TV. Nothing else. Well, except the windows and a few plants on the windowsill, but nothing more. Slowly Tsubaki placed Naruto on his feet. Naruto landed on the ground and smiled. He walked into the room with Tsubaki right behind him. She quickly looked left and then right before closing, and firmly locking, the door. Tsubaki stood next to Naruto as the young blonde surveyed his new surroundings. Naruto-kun. Naruto slowly turned around and glanced towards his handler. Tsubaki took an unconscious step back from him because of the large grin on his face. Tsubaki could honestly say that she wished that smile would just go up in smoke and fire. His eyes just seemed so happy and free, to the point where Tsubaki, with all her Anbu experience, knew that it was a lie. The eyes of the broken, that's what she was looking at. Shaking her head, Tsubaki snorted. She couldn't afford to get attached to him. This was just a simple mission, nothing more. Once it was over, then so was her connection to him as well. She was supposed to make sure he stayed loyal to Konoha and use his Jinchuriki abilities for the good of the village. She was not going to get attached. Especially not to a mentally unstable boy. However, Tsubaki couldn't help pity him. Only 10 and experiencing even more things than she probably did. Tsubaki didn't hold a grudge to the young boy in front of her, if only because she had lost nothing when the Kyuubi attacked. She didn't have a lover, the rest of her family had already passed already, she most certainly didn't have any children. She wouldn't say she was better for it, but maybe it was because she didn't lose anything that she couldn't place hatred to the boy. Not like it was his fault regardless of those facts. Shaking her head, Tsubaki quickly rummaged through her pockets and pulled out a small bottle. It's time to take your medication, Tsubaki said. She watched Naruto's eyes somewhat darken while the smile on his face stretched even further to a point that it should have been painful. Why, Anbu-chan? Naruto asked innocently. Tsubaki decided to answer while she opened the bottle. Your doctors prescribed it. Do not worry, Tsubaki said. She proceeded to pour out one pill and extended her hand towards Naruto. Naruto looked at the offering hand dreamily. Crush it. Crush the arm and watch the blood pour from Anbu-chan's arm while she writhed in pain. It would be fun. Just like the people did to him. They did so many fun things with him. Naruto wanted to thank them all for spending so much time with him. How could he not return the favor? Suddenly Naruto's eyes lost focus of Tsubaki. He heard the words that Kushina spoke to him as she was using her son's eyes to view the pill as well. Ka-chan wants to know if the pill will hurt us. She said if it will, then we'd rather make the pain go away. Far, far away, Anbu-chan, Naruto said happily. Tsubaki frowned and blinked her eyes. There was that Ka-chan thing again. Was this some personality that manifested itself to help him protect himself? Was this maybe what that other Yamanaka Anbu had discovered before he was deemed incompetent to continue his line of duties? If it was, then it wasn't real. Tsubaki would just have to play along. However, she doubted that a simple lie would get through her handily, so she told the truth. Naruto-kun, you tell your Ka-chan that this will not hurt either of you. It will settle your mind, help you focus, and drain your chakra so you'll have no way of hurting people, or yourself, Tsubaki said, keeping her thoughts to herself. Naruto looked from her to the pill. He seemed to be debating with himself for a while before he quickly snapped the pill and swallowed it. Tsubaki had a small smile on her face with a firm nod. Good, Now you stay here, Naruto-kun, and I will be back with your supplies. I will then make dinner. I will see you later, Tsubaki said before walking out of the door. She quickly hopped to the rooftop and jumped off at a great speed. Naruto watched her go from the window, his lasting eyes over her form. Kill her, Sochi, Kushina said with a large grin, feeling the chakra in her body forcefully leaving her body. This woman was not to be trusted. She tried to hurt them. Kushina would not let anyone hurt her son. Naruto snickered before he laughed as he clutched his sides. No, actually I have a better idea, Databane, Kushina thought. She lowly snickered and then laughed, falling to her knees with sheer excitement. No, she wouldn't kill her. She would do worse. Oh, so much worse. Nighttime. Tsubaki sighed as she laid her stuff in her room. She had just gotten back from making Naruto's dinner. Seems like the drug was working. Naruto wasn't laughing all the time. He was calm, watching TV with a somewhat normal expression on his face while Tsubaki washed his dishes. However, she couldn't help feeling unnerved those times that she could have sworn that she saw Naruto looking at her from the corner of his eyes. Tsubaki relayed her instructions to him, which Naruto nodded obediently towards them all. They would head to the academy tomorrow. Tsubaki sighed as she turned out the light to her bedroom. Today really was a tiring day. Hopefully tomorrow would be a lot better. Well, Tsubaki was sure that she wouldn't have to worry much. Placing her head on a pillow, Tsubaki allowed sleep to take her. She closed her eyes and drifted off to sleep. It was the dead of midnight, the moon high in the sky. In her apartment complex, Tsubaki's chest rose and fell, signifying her rest. She looked so peaceful. In the dark, a figure stood next to her bed. His grin plastered on his face, his dark blue eyes illuminating the dark. Slowly his hand reached for Tsubaki's neck. It would be so easy. Well, maybe not, considering that this was an Anbu. But how much sweeter would the blood be when he watched it drop to the floor? Right now, he couldn't care less that his chakra was almost gone. He had more than enough. You hurt Ka-chan. No one hurts Ka-chan, Dadbao, Naruto said, his fingers curling at the mere thought. It would be so easy. So easy. No, Sochi. This won't take long, Kushina replied. Naruto reluctantly stopped before he moved his body into the shadows with a small nod. Hi, Ka-chan, Naruto said, performing a hand sign. It was too dark to see what it looked like. Tsubaki flinched when she felt an influx of chakra. She quickly went to reach for her sword, but she noticed it was gone. No sooner did she realize it did she feel a sharp tip right on the bridge between her nose. Tsubaki didn't move. Spider on the wall, spider on the wall, what can you do when the fly has been caught by the ball? The dark, somewhat twisted, feminine voice asked. Tsubaki felt a bead of sweat go down the side of her face. Who are you? What do you want? Tsubaki asked slowly. The woman came out of her drawl and turned her violet eyes to look Tsubaki in the eyes. Tsubaki gasped. These eyes were broken. They were broken to the point of being locked in Konoha's mental facility and never seeing the light of day again, just as broken as. Tsubaki gasped when the woman's hand appeared over her mouth, silencing her. Shish, don't speak. We don't want to wake him up. He's so peaceful and cute when he sleeps, she said, snickering. She took Tsubaki's sword and trailed it down the bridge of her victim's nose, slowly drawing small amounts of blood. You lied to him. You lied to us. Liar. Liar. You will burn in hell's fire, she said, quickly laughing at her own joke. Tsubaki balled her fists while the woman looked down. Ka-chan will protect her baby from all threats, internal and external, she said. Tsubaki widened her eyes in realization. Naruto's Ka-chan was real. There was no alternate personality. Just someone as insane as he was, and out in the open. Tsubaki stayed silent. Nod if you understand that, Databane, she said in a sudden serious tone. Tsubaki blinked before quickly nodding, only realizing that her sword continued to cut her skin since the woman didn't move it. The woman's face quickly turned into a wide smile. Good. Hurt him again and I will stop by for another visit. Next time we can play a game. Yane. And just like that, she was gone in a swirl of wind. Tsubaki's sword bashed into the ground with a large sound. Quickly Tsubaki rolled over and turned on the lights. She took her sword into her hands. Pulsing her chakra for her target, she snarled when she didn't receive anything to go off of. The woman was utterly gone. Tsubaki bashed open her door to the outside and then unlocked Naruto's door. She busted inside and made her way to his room. She widened her eyes when she noticed Naruto sleeping silently. I should probably inform Hokage-sama about this. Someone is targeting Naruto. Okay. Once I take him to the academy, then I will report to Hokage-sama, Tsubaki thought to herself. She quickly took notice of her sleep attire and blushed. She quickly left Naruto's room and apartment before going back into her own. Tsubaki sighed and leaned her head back into her bed. It was official. Worst day ever. Next morning, Tsubaki helped dress Naruto. She was happy that he was cooperating just like last night. Tsubaki shivered when she thought of last night. A small bandage wrapped around her nose covering her scar from last night. Naruto had asked about it, in somewhat of a teasing way, but Tsubaki just told him not to worry about it. She didn't need him riled up so early. Quickly placing his books in his backpack, Tsubaki nodded while Naruto finished his breakfast. He smiled as he happily kicked his feet. Sometimes, Tsubaki wondered what it was like to be insane. To be so broken and yet so free that you could no longer comprehend the darkness of humanity, for you suffered too much of it. Tsubaki shook her head before taking Naruto's hand and led him out of the apartment. Tsubaki and Naruto quickly walked through the streets. Tsubaki took a glance to him. Naruto was still smiling widely, though not brightly. Tsubaki didn't know what was going on through his head. Now Naruto-kun, what did we talk about? Tsubaki asked, slightly unnerved when Naruto turned to her. That smile always reminded her of last night. She couldn't help but be worried. Somewhere, out there, someone was watching her and Naruto. Someone strong enough to restrain her, and someone mentally unstable. No fights with anyone. Listen to my instructors, and if people crowd around me, then I am to quickly walk, or run away and go back to the academy room until an instructor is present, Naruto recalled. Tsubaki quickly nodded in approval of his words as the two noticed the academy approach. Very good. Please behave, Tsubaki replied. Naruto's body shivered in excitement. His snickers drew attention to them, but Tsubaki was happy Naruto seemed to be disregarding people, this once. Tsubaki sighed in remembrance of the academy. The place where children were taught to serve in Konoha and possess the will of fire that made the village stand tall. Maybe this was what Naruto needed, but Tsubaki couldn't watch him today. She had to go to the Hokage mansion and report last night. Naruto's safety was a top priority. Tsubaki opened the door, allowing Naruto to pass through them. The woman at the front desk quickly glanced to the two before her eyes narrowed at the young blonde. Naruto turned to her and smiled widely. His eyes seemed to be roaming over her body. Naruto felt his heart pump a little faster. Kushina snickered to herself. Tsubaki and the receptionist watched Naruto slowly lick his lips. Cursing, Tsubaki quickly moved herself between Naruto and the receptionist's eyes. I'll ask you to keep your eyes to yourself, Chunin. I am his handler, and if I find any accounts of abuse, then I will take it as aggression to me. Do remember that, Tsubaki said sternly. The receptionist caught her glare before slowly backing down. Hi. Forgive me, she said, and Tsubaki quickly nodded. As she walked off, she turned around to see Naruto staring at the receptionist. Tsubaki narrowed her eyes, as did the woman behind the desk before Naruto jumped the counter and stared into her eyes. You smell good, receptionist-chan. You smell very, very good, Naruto complimented strangely. The receptionist frowned quickly while Naruto's smile widened. Tsubaki cursed. Flattery will get you nowhere, child. Now get out of my sight before I get angry, she said angrily. Tsubaki noticed that those words only seemed to get Naruto more stimulated as he looked at the receptionist with an interested look. It was like he was urging her to get angry so that he could fulfill his desire. What that desire was, Tsubaki didn't know, and she was not about to find out. Naruto, come on, Tsubaki ordered softly. Naruto took a curious glance to her before turning back to the Chunin female receptionist. He then jumped off the counter and proceeded to catch up with his handler, leaving the Chunin to her own devices. She watched the blonde leave through the halls before snarling to herself. Naruto and Tsubaki didn't have to walk very far before they came to the classroom. Tsubaki couldn't help but feel dread and anxiety. They were about to let a mentally unstable boy inside a classroom filled with children. It was easy for adults to see that children were inconsiderate, mean, disrespectful, and all around not the best thing for those with problems to be around, especially young adults, what with hormones raging like they did. Okay, Naruto-kun, just relax and take your medication, Tsubaki said, holding out the pill. Naruto quickly frowned, as did Kushina. It's going to make me tired again, Naruto complained. Tsubaki nodded. She'd rather not have a repeat performance of last time. Yes, Naruto-kun, you will feel tired because it will take away most of your immense chakra for a time, but it will also keep you calm and focused. I'm sorry I did not tell you that last night. Will you take it? Tsubaki asked. Naruto glanced to her before swiftly taking the pill and swallowing it. Tsubaki smiled while Naruto's eyes slowly dropped down. Are you ready, Naruto-kun? Tsubaki asked. Naruto, despite himself, clenched and unclenched his fingers. He could smell it. His Ka-chan could smell it. So much blood on the other side of the door. So much fun to be had. These years would be good to him and his mother. Kushina, in comparison, smirked to herself. Have fun, Sochi. Be happy. Feel at ease. I will protect you, Databane. From anyone, Kushina thought to herself. That was all she ever needed or wanted. Her son's happiness. A world without pain for them both. It would start now. Tsubaki swiftly opened the door. Naruto unconsciously licked his lips. This might be a good day after all. Iruka Yumino loved teaching. It was a type of thing that warmed his heart greatly. Knowing that he had a hand in developing the next generation of Konoha shinobi and kunoichi was something that blessed his soul. It made him happy. For some reason, Iruka always felt that he was doing his parents justice by teaching children. He was hoping they never had to get through the struggles that he had to get through growing up. Truly, there was no greater job than this. It was bliss. Would you brats shut up? Iruka shouted, making all the children wince at his tone before he pinched the bridge of his nose. Okay, so maybe it wasn't bliss, but it sure was something to do anyway. Taking a long look around his classroom, Iruka then slowly nodded before continuing on with the lesson. Now then, who can tell me name of the man who established Konoha's Chunin exams? Iruka asked with a somewhat tired sigh. He looked around the room for a few seconds before a hand went up into the air. Sakura, he asked. Holding her hand up was a young, pink-haired girl. Her emerald-crested eyes blinked brightly before she replied. Tobarama Senju, Iruka-sensei. He's the one who founded Konoha's Chunin exams, she responded expertly. Iruka slowly smiled with a nod of his head at the young girl's brightness. While not exactly the most adept at other things like taijutsu, the girl still showed a somewhat exceptional ability in information gathering and other things of that nature. She definitely had the potential to be a part of the cryptanalysis team if she put her mind to it. Very good, Sakura-san. Now then, on to the next question. Which person was? Iruka suddenly stopped when the door quickly opened. All the students quieted down instantly, as did Iruka. Everyone took notice as they watched a female jonin walk into the classroom, and right behind her was a young blonde. He was about everyone else's age, take a year from some of them. His eyes seemed to be pointed at the ground like he was watching his feet move. He suddenly snickered to himself. His grin seemed creepy to everyone else. The fact that it seemed to unnaturally stretch across his face painfully was also somewhat obvious. For some reason it made all the students nervous. Huh, what's wrong, boy? Don't like the new kid? A young boy with a dog seated atop his head asked. The young white-haired dog whimpered as he watched the blonde move. He could feel the danger that this boy presented himself and others around him. The dog was very wary. Meanwhile, no one took their eyes off the duo as Tsubaki came up to Iruka. Greetings, my name is Tsubaki. As of today, by orders of Hokage-sama, Uzumaki Naruto will be taking the academy courses, Tsubaki quickly said to the Chunin Academy instructor. Iruka looked down at the one Naruto Uzumaki. He could feel his anxiety rising. How long had it been since he had last seen the blonde out in the streets? Iruka didn't know how to feel when Naruto disappeared. He was never in the academy for obvious reason, and all of a sudden he was here now. It made no sense. Add to the fact that Iruka felt something off about him was also an added factor. After all, this was the pariah of Konoha. The Jinchuriki of its very own demon fox, Kyuubi no Yoko. The same beast that ravaged its lands 10 years ago. The same beast that killed his parents. Iruka took a deep breath to steady himself. Hi, I received the message from Hokage-sama this morning, Iruka said, and Tsubaki slowly nodded. The former Anbu captain wanted all of this done without any problems. Naruto had taken his medication, and if it was working as it should, then he should have a majority of his chakra locked away just in time for the academy to be over. Tsubaki took a look back and noticed the light grin on Naruto's face. He seemed to be staring at the floor, but Tsubaki could see the somewhat tired look in his broken eyes. It was indeed working, or at least she hoped. Good, then this shouldn't be a problem, Tsubaki said before turning to the classroom, specifically those to the left near windows. You all, move over into the next aisle, Tsubaki ordered. Iruka widened his eyes, as did the students. They all looked at each other for a moment before one girl snorted. Ah, why? This is my favorite seat. He doesn't need an entire aisle of seats, she called back. Tsubaki gave a small sigh from her lips. She was not used to dealing with children, but she had to make Naruto as isolated as possible. From what she learned, he couldn't be around crowds and stay calm for long, so by giving him his own separate aisle, Tsubaki hoped that this would minimize his stress, which seemed to have a hand in provoking his unstable mindset. Because I am a Jonin and what I say goes, girl. Now all of you get up from your seats now, Tsubaki ordered more fiercely. Quickly all the students to the left got to their feet and moved to the other aisles without a word. Seeing everyone comply, Tsubaki breathed a sigh of relief. They might not know it, but she was actually trying to save their lives here. Good, she said with a nod before turning around to face Naruto. All right, Naruto-kun, remember our promise? Tsubaki asked. Naruto looked from the ground to Tsubaki's eyes. Hi, I will remember to behave. I promise, Naruto said happily, completely not creeping anyone out. Tsubaki didn't seem convinced, but nodded nonetheless. Okay, Naruto-kun, I'll be back before you know it. Be safe, Tsubaki said before walking out of the door. Silently she created a clone, giving it specific orders to watch Naruto from outside the academy window while she reported to the Hokage. The clone nodded while Tsubaki walked out the entrance and then shot off atop the roofs of the buildings. Meanwhile, inside the classroom, everyone glared towards the newcomer of their classroom. Some seemed confused while others seemed more worried. Iruka found this silence unnerving as he watched Naruto slowly lick his lips. So Naruto-san, care to tell us anything about yourself? Iruka asked. Naruto turned to Academy Chunin before smiling widely, painfully so. Nay sensei, guess what a spider's favorite meal is? Naruto asked, suddenly startling his new teacher. Iruka raised an eyebrow. The class did so as well, however the one who did so the most happened to be a young boy in a trench coat with black glasses that covered his face. Naruto, what does that have to do with anything about yourself? Iruka asked. The Tsubaki clone, which found itself outside the window near the academy, narrowed its eyes. Things were escalating already. No, there was no proof yet. It hadn't gotten to that point yet. She just had to wait. Come on, sensei, guess, Naruto replied happily. Inside his mind, Kushina snickered to herself somewhat sleepily. Now that Tsubaki had heeded her warning, she knew what to expect of this medication, but that didn't mean she wasn't tired. I'm floating on top of water, sewer water. Will I drown if I fall asleep? Kushina wondered to herself. The redhead Uzumaki mother suddenly jumped up to her feet. She knew what she was going to do. Naruto, we don't have time for this. Just tell us about. Iruka stopped and quickly everyone shivered as Naruto's smile took a downward turn, if only slightly. Guess, sensei. Naruto replied quickly and angrily, his voice somewhat disturbed. The Tsubaki clone frowned indefinitely from its place in the trees. Iruka jumped back in surprise of the blonde's tone. Swallowing the lump in his throat, he just slowly nodded. I don't know, no, Naruto. What is a spider's favorite meal? Iruka asked while Naruto's frown quickly flew upwards. He suddenly started to snicker as he placed his arms around his stomach and laughed softly and mostly to himself. A fly who has been caught in the web and his limbs broken off. Naruto exclaimed before he fell back in laughter of his own joke. Some of the students gulped to themselves while others looked pale. One boy, a rather big-boned one, actually decided not to eat his chips anymore out of disgust. I see. Very interesting, Naruto. Now please take your seat, Iruka replied, wanting to hurry this along. After a few more moments, Naruto's laughter subsided before he nodded dreamily. Taking small, deliberate steps, his feet echoed through the small stairs as students stared at him like he was the strangest thing they had ever met. Naruto snickered to himself before he sat in a far-off corner in the left aisle. The one Tsubaki told him to sit at. He could feel everyone staring at him. Underneath his desk, his nails clawed at his pants legs, actually tearing them into small holes. The Tsubaki clone watched this happen before taking small notes to give to the original. Iruka could see the tension in the room heightening before he coughed, bringing everyone back to his attention. Well, okay, we'll take an introduction from Naruto-san later. In the meantime, let's continue on with class, Iruka stated, and most of the students slowly nodded. Some watched Naruto for a little bit before turning back to the lesson. Naruto laid his head on his desk, all the while snickering to himself for some unknown reason. Hokage Mansion. Are you sure that's what happened, Tsubaki? Hiruzen asked dangerously while Tsubaki hardened her eyes and folded her arms. Hokage-sama, I am pretty sure that I wouldn't botch the truth of someone restraining me with my own sword between my eyes, Tsubaki countered. Sarutobi could see the honesty on her face. Only a day and now Sarutobi was starting to question his decision regarding letting Naruto out. Maybe this was a mistake after all. After all, Tsubaki was one of Konoha's Anbu captains. Her strength was excellent and so was her sensory perception. For anyone to sneak up on her and restrain her merely by brute force was to be a force reckoned with. And what did the person say? Did they give a name or anything? Hiruzen asked, but only sighed in dismay when Tsubaki shook her head. It was such a pain to recall the event, if only because it was so dark that she didn't even see much of anything, but those eyes. Those broken eyes she couldn't forget. They were just so similar to Naruto's that there had to be some connection. I only know that she says, Ka-chan will protect her baby. Hokage-sama, I don't know who this person is, but they're a danger to Konoha. They are just as unstable as Naruto from what I could gather, only they are living out there somewhere. Perhaps these killings have been done by this person. They feel it's their duty to protect Naruto-kun, Tsubaki replied. Hiruzen took a breath of tobacco smoke from his pipe before exhaling. He rubbed his elderly beard before slowly nodding. It couldn't be who he thought it could be. She was dead. He had seen it. No one could escape the Shiki Fujin technique. No, it couldn't be. That would make sense, but I don't think that's the case, at least not the complete one. Thank you, Tsubaki. With this information we can take more active measures. Have the Anbu at the apartment keep a close eye on anyone within 20 yards of the complex. You will be the person that they most likely come after, but keep to yourself and keep Naruto safe above all, Sarutobi said. Tsubaki quickly nodded before she began to walk out of the room. With a bow she utilized the technique, Shunshin, and vacated from the Hokage's office. Hiruzen watched her go via the rooftops before sighing. Why does everything unpredictable gravitate towards Naruto-kun? Hiruzen thought to himself before shaking his head. He would have to look into it later. Right now he couldn't afford to fall behind on his paperwork than he already was doing. Sarutobi couldn't help but lightly bang his head to the desk as slight boredom. With Tsubaki. Tsubaki quickly landed on a tree branch outside the academy room where Naruto was. She motioned for her clone to join her. They weren't spotted. What has happened? Tsubaki asked, looking at Naruto closely. She could see him shivering as if he was cold for some reason. Raising an eyebrow, she looked around, but she saw no one near him. What was the problem? He couldn't be experiencing what he felt back in the streets yesterday, could he? No, Tsubaki doubted this was it. Not much happened. The students merely looked at him for an unnatural amount of time. However, one took an active approach, the clone said, prompting Tsubaki to quickly stand up and glare towards her clone's direction. The clone slowly nodded her head. Not in the way you believe. It was the Aburame heir, Shibi Aburame's son. He sent an insect to try and scout Naruto. Probably trying to get a feel for Naruto, as most Aburame were known to do with someone they meet for a first time, the clone said before she stopped. Tsubaki frowned at the silence before urging the clone to continue. Naruto-kun somehow pinned the insect to the table and he tore each of its limbs off one by one before finally crushing it in his fingers. Due to the layout of the building I couldn't see what he was looking at when his head turned, but judging from his position and our look into the academy classroom beforehand, I can assume he was looking at the Aburame, who likewise didn't have the most understanding expression on his face. The clone replied. Tsubaki sighed with a nod. She truly didn't want anyone needlessly provoking the blonde nor trying to get him curious to anyone else. She just wanted him to sit there and behave. Maybe that was asking for a little too much, but he seemed to be sitting there peacefully. Well, somewhat. With Naruto. Naruto snickered happily in his seat. His feet kicked up and down repeatedly. However, it wasn't a loud snickering, as his new teacher or his fellow students hadn't called him out on it. Marco. Naruto suddenly heard his mother call out. Polo. The blonde replied mentally. He could hear the splashing around of water of some kind and could only fathom what his mother was doing in her alone time. Kushina sunk into the murky depths of the sewer water trying to find something, anything to do. Never mind that this guy teaching was more boring than vegetable ramen, but also the fact that no one seemed to be paying as much attention to him as they did her son. Even now Kushina could feel the stares on her son and, by extension, herself. Kushina shivered inside the water with a small smile. So much blood, and yet it was just out of her reach. It was like the ultimate tease. Suddenly, Kushina and Naruto snapped out of their stupors just in time to hear Iruka announce the end of his lecture and tell the students to wait for their next teacher before he left. From the outside, how Tsubaki wished that he had stayed. As soon as he left, students crowded around Naruto's person, some not very happily. Who do you think you are, asshole? To think I had to move from my seat just so you could get an entire aisle to yourself. How is that fair? You from some type of clan or something? One of the elder boys sneered angrily. Tsubaki slowly narrowed her eyes at the scene. Inwardly, Kushina grinned widely to herself. Naruto did the same. The question soon got lost in a sea of other questions and accusations to the blonde's person. Naruto could feel all the malice directed at him. Granted, it wasn't as much malice as an adult's, but what unstable person could tell the difference? Huh, you gonna speak blondie or just sit there and look like a pathetic loser? Another asked. Naruto shivered in his seat. A bead of sweat dripped from his face. Tsubaki dismissed her clone quickly before lowly crouching. She'd be ready to intercept at a moment's notice and then bring Naruto back to the apartment where he could calm down. She hoped that he would. Okay, so added provocation to Naruto-kun will cause the medication's effects to lessen if his current state is given a mind, Tsubaki thought to herself. However, luck seemed to be with the students as another teacher came through the door. Alright, I'm sure we're all interested in our new student, but back to your seats. Now we'll begin where we left off, came another male and the students sighed before returning to their seats, but not before taking one last look at Naruto. The blonde and his mother slowed their thrill of the events before they took notice of an even greater amount of hatred aimed at them. They looked up and Kushina proceeded to grab her sides and roll back in pained laughter. He hated them. He hated their very existence. Even the teacher himself hated their very being. Naruto chuckled darkly to himself. Spider, spider, on the wall, do not be afraid. For the debt the fly has made will be paid, Naruto thought to himself. Tsubaki noticed the teacher's reaction as well. No doubt this was going to have to be something to watch out for. So it seems that even the teachers would not let go of their hatred. Good thing Tsubaki took that into account when she based this off the receptionist's view of Naruto when they first arrived. The day went on and on. Tsubaki would make a few regulated checkups with Naruto, ask him how he was feeling, which he would normally reply with a bad joke much to his broken humor, or comment about how good all of the students smelled, especially the pink-haired one that he had observed. He had asked Tsubaki if her hair was made out of pink bubblegum and if it was, then could he eat it. Tsubaki told him not, to which he merely pouted. As the day passed, Tsubaki brought Naruto his lunch, which happened to be some vegetables and miso ramen on the side. One of the stipulations was that Naruto and his Ka-chan got ramen. Now Tsubaki didn't know how he would react to one bowl of ramen, so she got two just in case. She quickly left Naruto but for a single moment to check up something back at home. She contemplated taking Naruto with her, but didn't see a reason to, so she just settled on the usual clone before leaving. The clone watched Naruto smile while he used his chopsticks to eat his food. Blech, this tastes awful, databane. Kushina replied while Naruto hummed to himself while kicking his feet around happily. Hi, the raspberry filling inside people is so much better, Ka-chan. Too bad we can't have any dango. The special kind with red filling is good. It's the best food in the world after ramen. At least you claim it is, Naruto responded. Kushina smiled before resuming her fun with her handstands. Oh Sochi, you're so sweet. I'm sure you'd find your Ka-chan the biggest walking dango around Konoha if you could. You make me so happy, Kushina replied. Naruto soaked in the warmth of his mother's words before moving on to his ramen. He slurped up the noodles quietly while listening to his mother's ecstatic praise of the ramen god and his blessings, which only served to make Naruto laugh even more. In time, Tsubaki returned and she watched the rest of the classes resume. Time seemed to pass by for her slowly as she watched Naruto's reactions. However, as the last class period came, Tsubaki could only find herself cursing. Alright class, we will now begin the subject of taijutsu, came the voice of another instructor, one with white hair. Tsubaki knew him instantly. Back when she was a chunin, this was her lover, now eternally her former lover, Mizuki. If Tsubaki were honest, she held no feelings about leaving the white-haired chunin. He always seemed off to her and Tsubaki's instincts were always sharp, which she led herself to believe. Which is why she also noted the glare towards Naruto's person, that he was plotting something. Great. Hand-to-hand combat. What should I do now? The medication's almost wearing off and Naruto-kun's getting back to his old self. He's starting to laugh loudly, drawing attention to himself, and he's staring at the damn students like they're all going to attack him and he's going to defend himself, violently. Shit. No matter what, I can't let them hit him. If they do, I don't know what his state of mind will be after this, Tsubaki thought to herself as she watched the students move around. Now I suggest we all do some light sparring. You have all been quick to learn the academy's style of taijutsu, so why not put theory to application? How about we all give the new kid a test to see what he can do? Now remember everyone, he hasn't learned the academy style, so go easy on him, Mizuki called out. Kushina could practically hear the disgust in his tone, which only served to make her blood rise to the challenge. She wondered how this man's blood tasted. Would it take like a raspberry-filled dango? Kushina hoped so. Ka-chan will protect her son from all the bad people. Ka-chan will make sure her son is loved and protected. She will squash the bad insects in her way. Databane, Kushina thought to herself. Tsubaki watched Naruto appear at the mat staring directly at Mizuki. Gomen Chunin sensei, but I promised handler Onichan that I wouldn't fight with anyone. Naruto promised. He promised that he did. Dadbao, Naruto responded. Mizuki raised an eyebrow and so did Tsubaki. When she had asked for him to not fight, she had felt it to be in the confines of non-official fights such as behind the school encounters or street fights of that sort. However, it pleased the ex-Anbu that her handler was handling himself accordingly. However, Mizuki wasn't so understanding. Now Naruto-kun, I know you're scared, this being your first time and all, but don't think of this as a fight, but rather as a light spar between friends, Mizuki said, plastering the fake smile on his face. Tsubaki narrowed her eyes. Unlike this morning where his eyes were low and focused, now they had a rather high and dilated look. Naruto's eyes couldn't seem to stay still, as if he were looking at everything around him for the first time. Everyone seemed to be looking at him in earnest, especially the dark, cold, stern glare of a raven-haired young man with black eyes dressed in a dark blue shirt and white pants. Friends. I have never had friends, Chunin sensei. Well, I have one friend. My Ka-chan. Naruto stated happily. Kushina gave a wide smile across her face. However, let it be known that what Tsubaki thought about children was true. They were rude, disrespectful, and very much inconsiderate. Hey, listen to that guy. What a mama's boy. Does she tuck you in at night and read you bedtime stories? One boy mocked. Soon an ensuing laughter came. Slowly Kushina's smile left her face before being replaced with a deep frown. This laughter, it was malicious. It reminded her of the laughter of that much noise. There was too much noise. Kushina's red hair shadowed her eyes. The hair that was said to be so beautiful when she was alive sprawled out across the wet floor as Kushina shivered. They were making fun of her son. They were hurting her son with their words. Kushina snickered as her hands clenched. Dango. Sweet red jam-filled dango. Oh Sochi, I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. I will now. Kill them, honey. Kill them for the delicious filling inside. Kushina cackled. Suddenly, before anyone could blink, Naruto appeared in front of the boy and grabbed his head. The boy shivered as Naruto's painful smile stretched across his face before the two looked into each other's eyes. The rest of the children widened their eyes to the speed the blonde used before they heard Naruto chuckling slightly. Ka-chan says that you smell good. She says you smell just like dango with red jam inside, Naruto replied swiftly. The boy widened his eyes as he was forced to staring into the maddening eyes of Uzumaki Naruto. Who is this guy? He's insane. Came the thoughts of the young dog owner while the other children were quickly having the same thoughts. A good most of the clan heirs kept their distance, merely observing the entire ordeal. Meanwhile, Mizuki frowned at what Naruto had said. He stared at Naruto firmly, making Naruto's grin go even wider. So would anyone like to challenge the new kid? Mizuki asked with a bright smile. The academy teacher had no way of knowing why the Kyuubi Jinchuriki was attending the academy after appearing right out of the blue, but he had no problem in trying to see how he could use the blonde to his advantage. As Mizuki waited, he suddenly heard whispering as Tsubaki watched Naruto clench and unclench his hands. Cursing, Tsubaki shook her head. She'd deal with the reprimands later. None of the kids seemed to want to get up before she made herself known. Chunin Mizuki. All of the children stopped and turned around. Mizuki looked up before he found a familiar sight that forced him to remember a lot of unwanted thoughts. He watched as Tsubaki dropped to the ground with a light glare. Ah, Tsubaki-san, how have you been? I haven't seen you in a long time. What have you been up to? Mizuki asked, and Tsubaki could clearly sense the malice behind his words, but she didn't let them bother her very much. That is not your concern right now, Mizuki. I am here to pick up Naruto-kun and take him home, Tsubaki said, quickly moving her way through the crowds of children. She could tell that Naruto was getting excited, too excited to continue to be around the class. It was time to take him home, and continue with their day. Tsubaki would handle his training from now on well, anything having to deal with sparring anyway. The academy would never have its class using ninjutsu against each other, so that was probably fine. Take him home. But this is the last class. Plus this is Naruto-san's first day. I'm sure he wouldn't want to miss his first lesson, Mizuki replied as he watched Tsubaki gently touch Naruto's shoulders. Naruto-kun, it's okay. There is dango with red jam back at the apartment. We can go get some, Tsubaki replied. Naruto's hands shivered over the frightened academy student's face. The large grin on his face and the wide eyes never left his stare as the two looked at each other. Everyone watched Naruto lick the lower portion of his lips. The world crumbles down. Flies swirl around the dead corpse. The demon claws at the throat. White masks. The white masks. So many white masks. Surrounding him. They surrounded him. No escape. He had no escape. Naruto cackled, tightening his grip over the student's face. Kushina cackled into as her nails clawed at the walls of the mindscape. Tsubaki growled before she found her mind racing. Tsubaki quickly slapped her hands together. With a flare of her chakra, she quickly touched the top of Naruto's head, releasing a sensual burst of chakra forcefully through his body, causing a temporary body shutdown. Tsubaki watched Naruto fall backwards before he landed safely into her arms. The frightened academy student shivered as the tears fell down his face while Tsubaki picked up Naruto into her arms. She turned to look at the students. If your parents could see you all right now, then they would be sorely disappointed. You'd all better shape up. This kind of disrespect towards your fellow classmates will not be tolerable once you're shinobi. Remember that, Tsubaki said before she quickly utilized the shunshin and vanished from the area in a puff of smoke. The kids watched her disappear with wide eyes. Mizuki blinked before a deafening silence came over the class. Yes, well anyway. Since Naruto-san isn't feeling well, then we will move on. Shino Aburame vs Kiba Inuzuka. Ino Yamanaka vs Hinata Hyuga. Sakura Haruno vs Amy. Sasuke Uchiha vs Shikamaru Nara. And lastly Choji Akamichi vs Sora. Mizuki continued to read off his list of students as one by one the children began to stand to their feet and walk to separate mats to begin their sparring. However, Mizuki couldn't take his eyes off the lone boy who was still crying and shivering from his place on the ground. No doubt he had been through enough already. Apartment complex. Tsubaki landed to the rooftop with a small smile. She looked down at the sleeping blonde in her arms. She doubted what she did would work multiple times without Naruto knowing it. She only got him by surprise that time. With a sigh, she jumped to their door and fished out the keys. She then opened the door. She followed up on that by putting Naruto in his bed. She pulled the covers over his body and proceeded to lean back into a chair. Here she was, an Anbu, and yet already exhausted from merely watching her handily for one day. Hokage-sama, is this really a good idea? Tsubaki thought to herself. Shaking her head, she turned to leave and gently closed the door. After some time, the sun slowly started to set over the horizon, leaving the village in the evening setting. It was during this time that Naruto slowly opened his eyes and took into account his room. The large grin returned to his face. Nay, what happened to the early bird who got the worm? Naruto asked. He quickly heard a separate, but tired laughter. Kushina slowly leaned up as she rubbed her eyelids. I don't know, sweetie. What happened to the early bird who got the worm? Kushina asked, smiling as she looked at her reflection in the murky sewer water. The worm ate his intestines and killed him from the inside at night. Naruto proclaimed. Ha 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 ha. Kushina laughed as she rolled her clothes along the wet floor while Naruto kicked his feet into his sheets. The two continued in their merriment for some time before they heard Naruto's door open, revealing Tsubaki. I see you're awake, Naruto-kun. That's good. I'm sorry I had to do what I did to you, Tsubaki said while Naruto's laughter calmed down significantly to slow and steady giggles. Gomen Handler-chan, I didn't behave, Naruto stated, the soft smile showing a twitch in his face. Tsubaki approached cautiously before sitting on side of Naruto's bed. Very well. Since you're honest, then I will let it slide this time, Naruto-kun, especially since this was your first day and they provoked you unnecessarily. However, I want you to promise then you will not do this ever again. Remember that you agreed to Hokage-sama's conditions that you and Ka-chan would behave, understand? Tsubaki asked. Naruto grinned widely and nodded his head quickly. Tsubaki nodded with a sigh before getting up. I have instructed your teachers to not disturb you for a little while. I do not think you should go back there so soon after today. Now, Naruto-kun, I made dango for you, me and Ka-chan, Tsubaki said, and she watched Naruto's face turn to her. Kushina licked her lips before she jumped into the air shouting, dango, over and over again. She even decided to do some backflips to celebrate. However, Naruto-kun, I want you to know that we will have to train. I don't think I can trust the academy students to intentionally hold back against you. Naruto, no matter what happens with us tomorrow, you must remember that I will never intentionally hurt you. Do you understand? Tsubaki asked. Naruto and Kushina suddenly stopped laughing and smiling. Their eyes seemed to harden and a certain thrill made their blood jump. You won't hurt me. Ka-chan has never let anyone hurt me in 4 years. Ever since Ka-chan came I haven't been hit or beaten. Ka-chan protects me, Dadbeo, Naruto claimed, and Tsubaki narrowed her eyes. Could that have meant that whoever was protecting Naruto had been doing it for 4 years? Killing any civilian who did harm to him, no matter how small. Tsubaki shuddered at the notion. I understand that, Naruto. Very well, let's see if Ka-chan can help us tomorrow. I'll show you stances and then we'll judge your reaction time. If Ka-chan is able to protect you, then we'll figure something out for that too, Tsubaki said with a disarming smile. Whether Naruto took it or not she didn't know, but she really hoped it was the former. I have dinner ready, so come with me once you're ready, Tsubaki stated. Naruto watched her leave, his eyes taking in her form like a big target were painted on her backside. Ka-chan will protect you, Sochi. She swears it, Databane, Kushina quickly proclaimed. Naruto nodded brightly before jumping to his feet and walking out of his room to go eat. Next morning, in the fields, out near training ground 19, Tsubaki and Naruto sat on the tall grass. Both had woken up early in the morning to get started. Tsubaki did the quick routine of washing and dressing Naruto before fixing his breakfast. The two then headed out, but not before Tsubaki set things up beforehand. Tsubaki had notified both the Hokage and a few Anbu about what she and Naruto would be doing. Sarutobi came a bit of reluctant consent before hearing Tsubaki's plan. Around the forested area were at least 5 or 6 other Anbu besides Tsubaki. In the event that Naruto lost himself and somehow, albeit it highly unlikely, killed Tsubaki, then the remaining Anbu would sedate him and place him back in Konoha's mental facility until further notice. However, unknown to Tsubaki, Naruto could also sense the Anbu. Tsubaki was confused by the maddening grin on his face, but she chalked that up to something else. Now Naruto-kun, before we begin, what can you tell me about chakra? If you know what it is at all. Tsubaki asked slowly. Oh, I know. Chakra is that thing Ka-chan sucks out of people's bodies who attack me before they fall to the ground. Naruto stated happily and somewhat innocently. The Anbu surrounding the two raised their eyebrows in surprise, but Tsubaki didn't give anyone the signal to do anything, so no one moved. Does this person has the ability to steal chakra? I'll have to look into this, Tsubaki thought to herself before finally registering Naruto's answer. She responded by shaking her head, negating Naruto's answer. Naruto pouted before Tsubaki straightened herself. Naruto-kun, chakra, a person's life force. It is the molding of physical energy, which is present in your body, with your spiritual energy from your mind. Follow me, Tsubaki asked. Naruto tilted his head to the side. Chakra. Chakra everywhere. Chakra. Chakra. Must be bare. Mix of one. Mix of two. Drink it down or you get the flu. Kushina sang to herself as she rocked her body back and forth, lightly snickering to herself from her own joke. Naruto-kun, do you know why I didn't have you take your medication today? Tsubaki asked. I wouldn't be tired and got to play, right? Naruto asked happily. Tsubaki slowly nodded before standing to her feet. That is correct. We will get to play for a long time, Tsubaki said, and Naruto nodded giddily. Naruto hopped to his feet in turn, waiting for her to play with him. A simple punch should be enough to get started. If he's got good street instincts like I think he does, then he should be able to dodge this relatively easily, Tsubaki thought to herself. She quickly nodded before swiftly throwing out a punch in Naruto's direction. The wind suddenly picked up, blowing blades of grass and leaves through the air. The Anbu stiffened, if only slightly. Tsubaki widened her eyes. Right between her fist and Naruto's face was a single white chain. Kushina frowned from her position on the waters. Tsubaki watched the smile on Naruto's face slowly turn dark and twisted, almost maniacal in a sense. What is this feeling? Is he draining my chakra? Tsubaki thought to herself before retracting her fist. She felt the pull quickly fade away. I will protect Ka-chan, Naruto replied heatedly. How he managed to unleash this amount of bloodlust all while the grin stayed on his face was Tsubaki's main concern. Tsubaki took notice of the way his hand started to move forward. She also watched the chain dance around his body protectively. Tsubaki could feel his intent. He was going to try to kill her for what she had done. The Anbu seemed ready to move, but Tsubaki held up her hand. Impressive, Naruto-kun. Tsubaki responded happily. Naruto's hand suddenly twitched to a pause before he looked at the smile on her face. Tsubaki had to erase her intent. Naruto seemed to instinctually respond to a person's intent. She quickly erased it with praise. Kushina rose an eyebrow before both heard Tsubaki clapping. Just keep clapping. Lower the intent until he felt calm and safe. Tsubaki watched carefully until she noticed visible signs that Naruto's body had relaxed and taken itself out of some natural defensive stance. Naruto withdrew his hand and the chain quickly disappeared once again. However, Tsubaki didn't drop her guard. It seems that subconsciously you already have some idea of chakra and how it works, Tsubaki stated. Naruto blinked a few times and Tsubaki noted the lightness that his eyes seemed to exude. Okay. We've got him calmed down now. As I suspected, he's been treated so poorly that he's somehow able to react to the intent within a person if it means to do him harm. But how should I train him then if he takes every move like it's going to kill him? Tsubaki thought to herself before she took notice of Naruto's wide grin. The chain suddenly appeared. Tsubaki frowned. Nay. Let's play some more, Anbu-chan. Let's play some more. Naruto chuckled as the chain instantly reappeared and launched itself at her person. Tsubaki quickly jumped back as the chain bashed itself into the ground, creating a loud thud. Naruto-kun. Tsubaki called out. The Anbu in the trees stiffened as Naruto laughed. Inside the mindscape, Kushina grinned widely while her fingers clenched painfully into her skin. More. Play more, Anbu-san. Play with Sochi more, Databane. Play with us more. Kushina repeated over and over as she watched the events going on outside. She watched Tsubaki flip through the air in a valiant effort to get away from the person she was supposed to be handling. Tsubaki quickly drew out a kunai to combat the chains. The sounds of metal hitting metal became apparent throughout the training ground. Sparks fell along the ground. Such force. How is he manipulating his chakra like this? Tsubaki thought to herself. Quickly swirling her body, she pushed the chain's momentum upward, allowing her the freedom to move away. Naruto cackled as he clutched the sides of his head. Nei Anbu-chan, can our Anbu Ni-chans and Nei-chans join us? We can all have fun with Ka-chan. Naruto said, and Tsubaki quickly took notice of the chain flaring itself. Almost instantly it was coated in lightning, causing it to cackle. Naruto moved his hand, wildly manipulating the chain with Kushina's help as the metal bashed against the ground, sending short burst of Raiden chakra through the ground. Tsubaki took a deep breath before she shuddered in realization. He believes this to be a game. Okay. I can capitalize on that, Tsubaki thought to herself. Tsubaki soon snapped herself out of her stupor just enough to dodge a second chain. The handler widened her eyes at the mere speed that the chains exuded. She'd have to act fast. Tsubaki looked up and noticed Naruto was still on his spot before holding up his hand. Rensa no Mai, chain dance, Naruto uttered, and Tsubaki watched the first and second chain intertwine together. The chakra flared brightly, making Tsubaki close her eyes. Naruto grinned widely at this motion of the next game before shooting his hand forward. The chain obeyed and made its way for Tsubaki's form. Tsubaki shivered. There was no intent. She could feel no intent from him to completely harm her. Had he really gone so far that he couldn't even release an appropriate intent for the given situation? No, it's a game. He still sees this as a game. It's a long shot, but it might work, Tsubaki said to herself. She quickly cleared her throat and steeled herself. Era, you got me, Naruto-kun. You win, Tsubaki said, and she slowly opened her eyes. She smiled and nodded. I thought so, Tsubaki told herself mentally with a small smile. She saw the chains just inches from her face as Naruto dropped his hands. Naruto's grin widened before the chains slumped to the ground. She watched Naruto's eyes settle. Kushina's eyes did the same. With a swift hand, Tsubaki dispelled the Anbu in the trees, making them drop their weapons. Quickly, yet cautiously, Tsubaki made her way for Naruto. Soon the two stood just a few feet from each other. Naruto's body shook lightly as if it were trying to get warm in cold weather. The former female Anbu also watched as Naruto fell backwards, landing into the grass. With an exhale of breath, Tsubaki sat next to him. So far as Tsubaki was concerned, a key to Naruto's reactions was a means of coherent and incoherent stimulation. As far as Tsubaki had followed, Naruto reacted to various stimuli in some part of his brain. Tsubaki remembered reading a report a few years ago by one of the head medics of the facility stating that a normal person's brain was able to think, separate, and rationalize certain stimuli and make it respond to a given situation. If a situation was bitter and angry, then the stimulation response was anger. If it was dark, depressing, or lonely, then the stimulation was sadness, and vice versa for all emotions. But for a mentally unstable person, their mind being so incapable of understanding or contemplating the deeds so horribly done to them that it warped their brain into what it was now, the stimulation response also got warped as well. The mind literally made them think the same stimulation to any given circumstance. But the thing about it was this: it was impossible to predict an insane person's stimulation response. As Tsubaki could see, Naruto liked to smile and laugh to the point where it was creepy and worrying for Tsubaki, but then there was also Naruto's stimulation response to incoming danger. Inwardly he seemed to perceive a person's intent. How this was, Tsubaki didn't know. She'd have to spend a lot more time with him. She knew she would be doing just that. Tsubaki discreetly dispelled the Anbu, hoping to make sure that they reported their findings to the Hokage, leaving the two alone for the rest of the day. Tsubaki continued to show Naruto a standard taijutsu form. Tsubaki couldn't believe she had to relate everything she did to a game. She watched Naruto copy her as best she could while not trying to impose any sort of ill will against him. No doubt he would pick it up immediately if she did. Kushina watched the scene on a side of the wall she was standing on. Stick to a wall, stick to wall, be sure not to drop or your head will break from the fall. Ha 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 ha, Kushina joked. Naruto heard her joke, but didn't respond, merely giving a merry chuckle to her words. Alright Naruto-kun, it's time for your medication, Tsubaki said. She looked over, but Naruto didn't seem to register her words. Nay, Anbu Nichan. Guess what the demon said to the monster? Naruto said with a somewhat straight face, or at least as straight as he could make it. Tsubaki frowned, but as she had found, it was best not to keep Naruto waiting and just indulge him. I don't know Naruto-kun, what did the demon say to the monster? Tsubaki asked, and Naruto stared at her for a moment. The demon said, "Hey, you look like me." He soon found he was talking to a mirror. Naruto answered. Tsubaki raised an eyebrow at his words before releasing a sigh when she found him double over in laughter. Tsubaki looked at Naruto worriedly. Suddenly catching herself, Tsubaki shook her head. I see. Now will you take your medicine, Naruto? Tsubaki asked. However, she didn't get a response as Naruto continued laughing. At that same time, Kushina spoke. Nay Sochi, what is a banana's favorite exercise? Kushina suddenly asked. Naruto grinned widely. I don't know Ka-chan, what is a banana's favorite exercise? Naruto asked outwardly. This was official to set Tsubaki on edge. The Jonin jumped to her feet and glared heatedly around the forest. Was it possible that they were being watched? Whoever this person was, it shows that had some way of contacting Naruto somehow. Suffice to say this, but Tsubaki was troubled. A banana's split databane. Kushina exclaimed giddily. She splashed in the sewer water while Naruto snickered. Tsubaki sighed. Naruto-kun, if you do not take your medication then you and Ka-chan will not get ramen, Tsubaki said. Naruto's eyes seemed to widen before his gaze fell on her. Tsubaki watched his fists ball dangerously and she could even feel his chakra at her. Tsubaki couldn't help but feel unnerved at the smile that never left his face. Hi Anbu Nichan, Naruto said trainingly. Tsubaki held out the pill and Naruto swallowed it. In no time, Tsubaki watched Naruto's eyelids lower tiredly along with a normal smile for a change. Naruto calmly stood to his feet before Tsubaki directed him out of the training fields. Training him was going to prove difficult. Oh, it was possible, but very difficult. Hokage Mansion. Hokage-sama, I have to express my concerns about allowing Uzumaki Naruto to roam among the academy students, spoke an Anbu. In front of Hiruzen Sarutobi was the squad that Tsubaki had sent to him from before to report everything that they had seen. Right next to Hiruzen were his two teammates, Kaharu Udatane and Homura Mitokado. The two advisors and two council members for Konoha's council and the Sandaime Hokage. The two narrowed their eyes before turning towards the Sandaime. Hiruzen, you never informed us that you allowed Uzumaki Naruto to go free. How would it benefit the village at all if he's loose? Came the voice of the elderly Kaharu. Hiruzen narrowed his eyes from where he was sitting. It benefits the village because as much as most of us don't realize it, we need Naruto-kun. Everyone in this room knows why. For us to utilize Naruto-kun then we need him to be strong. He's Konoha's protection, whether we all agree or not, Hiruzen. Inwardly the old man cringed. He couldn't believe he was talking like this about his adopted grandson like he was a piece of property. It left a terrible pill to swallow in Sarutobi's throat. Your point holds value, Hiruzen, but Uzumaki Naruto is hardly at the level of mental accountability where he can think of himself as Konoha's protection. We don't even know what he thinks about. The last person who tried committed suicide the second they were released from Naruto's mind, Homura said, making Sarutobi grimace. You don't have to remind me of that. Need I remind any of you why this is even our current reality? Sarutobi asked heatedly. The Anbu winced as did the two elderly council members. No one said anything as they looked down in shame. Truth be told, neither Kaharu nor Homura held a grudge against Naruto, especially not when they felt he had such an important role to the village, if not one of the most important roles. However, no one could forget the shame they felt that time. You do not need to remind us, Hiruzen, Kaharu responded rather softly. Homura quickly nodded, but didn't look Sarutobi in the eye. The elderly Sandaime Hokage pinched the bridge of his nose and shook his head. Besides, I have one of our Anbu Black Ops' most capable shinobi guarding him, Kazuna-san, Sarutobi said. Quickly Kaharu and Homura looked towards their village leader in utter surprise. Kazuna, Hokage-sama, I am willing to admit that you are right in that we need Naruto-kun, but are you sure that this is a good idea? Kazuna-san has always been, should I say, Tense, with attention to things like this, Kaharu said, and Hiruzen could tell what she was talking about. Kazuna wasn't exactly the nicest person in the Anbu. A lot considered her downright stiff and incapable of caring about anyone but herself. Kazuna was very cutthroat. And who would you have me use? Do you know anyone in the Anbu who could deal with Naruto-kun like Kazuna-san? Sarutobi asked. The two elderly looked to be very in thought. There were about 3 former Anbu that could have done it. Sadly, one of those 3 was dead, the other went rogue, the last one couldn't take the pressure anymore and quit. It was disheartening, but Kazuna was the only one who could do it. Well, anyway, Hokage-sama, Kazuna-san also wonders about Uzumaki Naruto taking the taijutsu classes. She pulled him out before things got out of hand yesterday and would like your orders regarding Uzumaki Naruto's placement in sparring with his fellow students, another of the Anbu replied. Kaharu and Homura frowned before turning towards the Sandaime. Hiruzen looked to be in grave thought. No matter how much he felt Konoha needed Naruto in this trying time, he couldn't subject the next generation to the blonde's ways. The village would have Naruto's head or Naruto would have their heads, either or, and Sarutobi didn't want either. Well, as far as Sarutobi remembered, ever since that incident 6 years ago, Naruto hadn't received a single injury to his person. None via ninjutsu, genjutsu or taijutsu, some even by experienced shinobi, though those shinobi were easily caught and detained. Everyone watched the Sandaime lean forward. Is taijutsu his last class? Hiruzen asked, and the Anbu quickly nodded. Hi Sandaime-sama. Taijutsu is always the last class for the students to take before they go home, the Anbu responded. Hiruzen nodded before sighing. Shaking his head, everyone could see that he didn't wish to discuss this issue any further. Well, is it wise to have him out, what with our mysterious murderer still on the loose? 2 days ago marked the 4th time civilians and a few shinobi within Konoha have been killed with the killer still at large, Kaharu replied, deciding to switch topics for the moment. Hiruzen sighed when he thought about that. That is true. Whoever it is, they know Naruto-kun's state of mind and they see it as their duty to protect him. I had hoped that it would narrow things down, if Naruto-kun ever reached out to anyone. There was only 2 people he reached out to. Tsuki and Ayame of Ichiraku House, and that was 6 years ago. I have had them both checked out, so far they keep to themselves. It's not them, Sarutobi said with a tone of finality. No one seemed to have anything to say on the matter. Well, okay. What about his team then? I'm sorry, but I don't think I can see him getting along with teammates or a sensei, Homura pointed out. The Anbu, Kaharu, and Homura watched Sarutobi nod his head in agreement. I also believe that to be true for the Chunin exams down the line, Sarutobi responded. The Anbu widened their eyes. Hokage-sama, you're not actually thinking of letting Uzumaki Naruto out of the village, are you? We don't know how he'll function in an outside environment. He's hardly of the capable mind even here. Hokage-sama, he tried to kill his handler all the while claiming it was a game. We are unsure, but somehow Tsubaki-san managed to calm him down, but it's obvious that no one knows when the urge will spike again. From our reports from the facility, we have it on good account that Naruto Uzumaki is prone to a very violent type of insanity. It happened twice in 6 years. Somehow, we're unsure, but Naruto Uzumaki came into contact with blood and it caused him to lash out in his room, releasing an unprecedented amount of chakra both times. It took 3 Jonin and 1 Chunin to restrain him. The Chunin didn't make it. You know that, the leader of the squad said. Hiruzen nodded. That shouldn't be a problem if Tsubaki continues with the prescription that we have written for Naruto-kun. It keeps him calm and somewhat sociable. I know it leaves him drained, but it's better than the alternative. We will just have to make the best of this situation. When you leave, retrieve Taka and hubby for me. Also give this scroll to Kazuna-san, Sarutobi said, tossing a scroll with a red seal over it. The Anbu squad quickly bowed. Hi, they said before they vanished out of sight, leaving the Sandaime and the elders alone in the room. Things have become much more complicated these times that we have been around, Kaharu said with a sigh before standing to her feet. Homura quickly did the same with a nod of his head. Sarutobi merely tipped his Hokage hat before walking away. Kaharu and Homura went their separate ways as well. With Tsubaki and Naruto. Tsubaki took a glance towards Naruto. The blonde was lightly dragging himself behind her, his features somewhat controlled. No matter what, Tsubaki just couldn't get rid of that maddening grin to his face. It was like concrete plastered to his face. Around them, Tsubaki could hear the silent whispers and curses about the blonde young man. Tsubaki could feel the intent to harm from some of the civilians, a minority, but it was there nonetheless, and if Tsubaki could feel it, then she had no doubt that Naruto could feel it as well. She'd rather not have a repeat performance of 2 days ago back in the streets. The itsy bitsy spiders climbed up the water spout. Down came the blood and wiped the spiders out. Out came the moon and drank up all the blood. The itsy bitsy spiders died on the ground, lifeless. Ha 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 ha. Naruto softly chuckled to himself. Tsubaki took a deep breath before continuing on. This had to be his way of coping with the things around him. Inside the minscape, Kushina eased herself into the water. Then came birds and ate the spiders' corpses. The itsy bitsy spiders are no more, Databane, Kushina finished before slowly regressing her body into the sewer water. As she regressed into the water, it was for a brief second that the redhead's violet eyes turned red. Her pupils turned into slits while her hair spiraled out across the sewer water until Kushina's body disappeared for her to do whatever she was going to do. As the handler-handily duo walked through the streets, the former suddenly came to a stop to see the academy teacher, Iruka Yumino, running towards them. "Ah, there you are, Tsubaki-san," Iruka said. The Jonin in question raised an eyebrow before stopping. Naruto stopped behind her. "Scarface-san," Naruto called out. Iruka's eyebrow twitched before glaring towards the student in question. "You," Iruka said as he stomped his way over to Naruto. Naruto watched the incoming man's form. Tsubaki took notice of Naruto's gesture. A stance ready to kill. Quickly countering, Tsubaki grabbed Iruka's shoulder and pulled him back. "How might we be of service to you, Yumino-san?" Tsubaki asked. Iruka seemed confused for a second before taking a deep breath to calm himself. Yes. Anyway, I have been sent out to collect Uzumaki Naruto. He's not been in the academy all day and we were worried that he ditched," Iruka stated. Tsubaki looked at the Chunin sternly before looking back at Naruto. The blonde was swaying his head left and right like it a blade of grass in the wind. Shaking her head, she turned back. "I see. Well, don't worry. He has not ditched. After yesterday's taijutsu incident, I felt it prudent that he not attend today, giving him and the students the time to settle," Tsubaki replied professionally. Iruka blinked before chuckling sheepishly. "Ah, I see. That's right. Mizuki did tell me about that incident." "Well, I guess you're right. I guess the pressure got to him," Iruka said. Tsubaki managed to raise an eyebrow at his words. He wasn't exactly wrong, but not particularly right either. "Rest assured, he will be in class tomorrow," Tsubaki replied. Iruka gave a swift nod before he noticed Tsubaki turn around. "Come, Naruto-kun," Tsubaki said. Naruto didn't give any indication that he heard her order other than moving his feet in conjunction with her own as the two continued through the streets. Iruka watched them leave before sighing. However, as he looked back in their direction, he noticed that Naruto's eyes seemed to be looked on him. Iruka involuntarily shivered at the dark intent behind them. It was like Iruka was staring into the depths of his own consciousness. He stood at the very edge of the cliff known as his sanity, just waiting to fall into the dark abyss below known to only the select few. Iruka wasn't sure, but he thought he saw someone behind the young blonde. As Naruto's eyes focused on him with that sickeningly happy smile on his face, he thought he saw a redhead woman hovering over Naruto's body. Chains bursted from the ground and danced around Naruto's form. One chain actually grazed his cheek sensually before the woman bent over his shoulder. Her eyes never broke contact with Iruka's before she placed a small motherly kiss to her son's cheek just before whispering something into his ear. It must have been good because Iruka watched Naruto's grin widen, almost painfully. Naruto's mouth opened. "Ka-chan likes you, Scarface-san," Iruka thought he heard Naruto say in a warped, almost undefined tone. Quickly Iruka shook his head and rubbed his eyes. He opened them and noticed that Naruto was gone and so was Tsubaki. Iruka was standing in the middle of the streets as civilians began to pass him one after the other. Iruka looked down and he noticed his hands and legs shaking, twitching uncontrollably. A bead of sweat dropped from his face into the ground. Iruka's legs soon followed as he dropped to his knees almost gasping for breath. Meanwhile, Tsubaki and Naruto continued to walk through the streets at a somewhat strained pace. Tsubaki couldn't help eye Naruto. He did something. She didn't know what, but she just felt it. The grin on his face was a sign of that. Given that he had taken his medication, that grin shouldn't have returned for a few hours, and it was only half past the previous hour. Shaking her head, Tsubaki opted not to comment. He hadn't done anything, so she wouldn't say anything unless it became an issue. Looking to see that they were just a few feet from the apartment complex, Tsubaki turned around. All right, Naruto-kun. We're here. Now let's. Tsubaki stopped and narrowed her eyes. She didn't have to look behind herself to know that the Anbu she sent to the Hokage was back to her. Taking a deep breath, she sighed. I take it that Hokage-sama has replied. She asked. The Anbu didn't say a word, merely tossing the scroll to her. Tsubaki effortlessly grabbed it before she watched the Anbu disappear. A red sealed scroll. The sign that this wasn't meant to be read outside. Let's go, Naruto-kun, Tsubaki said, opening the door. Naruto quickly followed inside. The handler-handily duo passed the receptionist desk. The landlord disguised Anbu and Tsubaki gave a knowing glance to each other before Tsubaki was out of sight. The two climbed up the stairs before making it to their door. Tsubaki fished out Naruto's keys from her pockets and then proceeded to open the door. Both walked inside. The air-conditioned apartment soothed them both. Naruto-kun, leave your clothes in your room. I'll give you a bath in a second, Tsubaki replied. Naruto nodded before walking into his room without a word. Seriously, having your chakra drained was an exhausting experience, and for Naruto it wasn't fun. He wanted fun. Nonetheless, Naruto promised to behave, that he did. So he would do so. As Tsubaki watched Naruto leave, she leaned against the counter and unfurled the scroll. Tsubaki's eyes scanned the notes as only a seasoned Anbu captain could before quickly furling it back up. I see. Well, I figured that much. So Hokage-sama has decided to invoke the special privilege on Naruto-kun. Well, that will certainly keep him from killing the students or harming himself in that regard. Still no taijutsu class. Well, given from what I had seen of him back in the forest, then I wonder how he would implement taijutsu anyway. I would even have to wonder if any enemy could get close enough to him to even land a punch on him. From the way his chains moved, despite their seemingly aimless bashing around, they were very precise. Dare I saw Anbu captain precise. Naruto-kun could never be in that much danger to have Anbu-like reactions without a proper training guide and years of hard work to be noted. So why is he able to master those chains of his so well? Is it linked to his insane nature? Tsubaki wondered to herself as she continued to draw up conclusions left and right, though with not much proof to found them on. Well, I'll think on these things another time, Tsubaki said, nodding to herself as she prepared her items to begin Naruto's bath. Hopefully without any complications. Tsubaki watched as Naruto sat calmly while she washed his hair. Honestly, if Tsubaki cared to give it a reason, she found this all to be taxing. It was definitely a different experience from the usual S-rank missions she took. All this pressure depended on her. Not that she wasn't used to being in situations where pressure was present, but she felt even more involved in it than now. Right in front of her, smiling and grinning like there wasn't a single problem in the world, was a ticking time bomb, and all it would take would be one careless incident by either civilian or shinobi, and this bomb would explode, devastating all who got in its way. Tsubaki sighed. She really didn't want to be involved with this. Why her? There had to be other Anbu capable enough to handle this task. Why did it have to fall on her? Naruto-kun, hold still, Tsubaki said as Naruto squirmed around, much to her ire. In any case, unstable or not, he was definitely a handful. Finally, with Naruto settling down, Tsubaki took the time to glance at his body. She frowned. Maybe she didn't notice it last time, since she figured what he looked like hadn't been such a big deal, but no, she wasn't so sure. She could definitely make the outline of muscles around his arms. So he had done something physical of some nature, though what, Tsubaki wasn't sure. Pinching her nose in frustration, she didn't think she had time to go over this. Naruto-kun, we need to talk about your incident in class yesterday, Tsubaki said. She looked up and noticed Naruto's eyes staring wide at her. I didn't behave, did I? I got into a fight, Dadbeo, Naruto exclaimed. Tsubaki gave a dry chuckle. It was hardly a fight, and it would have never been a fight if he was involved. It would merely be a massacre. Well, no, you didn't get into a fight, but it would have surely escalated into one. I saw everything, so I know that it wasn't truly your fault. Nonetheless, you must not raise to others' provocations, Tsubaki said, and she noticed the smile on Naruto's face scrunch into a look of disturbed anger. They laughed at Ka-chan. No one laughs at Ka-chan. Only bad people laugh at my Ka-chan. I will protect Ka-chan. Naruto exclaimed. Tsubaki tightened her grip over his shoulder to steady him. She appeased his anger by nodding. It was only with his mention of the person known as Ka-chan that she remembered of the person that was out in the village, probably watching them, observing them. I agree. No one should make fun of your Ka-chan, or whoever. Tsubaki did agree. She actually knew that all those kids, if they had been orphans just like Naruto was, then they would crave a parent's attention almost desperately. You never know what you have until it's gone. However, Naruto-kun, they don't understand that you find your Ka-chan special. For kids, parents are supposed to be annoying or irritating. That is why they made fun of you. However, Naruto-kun, do you find your Ka-chan special? Tsubaki asked. Naruto instantly nodded. Hi, Ka-chan is Ka-chan. Ka-chan is the best Ka-chan in the world, Naruto replied. Kushina's face brightened as she hung from the ceiling of the sewer-like mindscape. Oh Sochi. I love you too. You're the best Sochi in the world. Sochi. So Kai. Soup chicken. Kushina contemplated to herself. The ex-Anbu captain laughed to herself as her hair flailed around in the air. Seeing his agreement, Tsubaki nodded. Then it should not matter to you what others think. Also Naruto-kun, I didn't mean for you to take my instructions so literally, but that is my fault for not specifying. When I told you not to fight, I meant do not fight outside of the academy teacher's instructions. But I'm glad that you listened to me. Just try not to get riled up, Tsubaki said. Naruto nodded quickly as Tsubaki finished pouring water over his body, then proceeding to dry him with a towel. That being said, then I supposed it doesn't matter anymore, as you won't be taking taijutsu classes. Instead you, and by extension I, will be attending something else. I wasn't notified of what, but I'm sure we'll find out tomorrow, Tsubaki replied. Naruto merely nodded with that same wide expression on his face as Tsubaki helped him put on some clothes before walking out of the bathroom. Nighttime. Tsubaki finished the dishes of her and Naruto's dinner. Naruto was seated on his couch watching TV with an amused expression. The same could be said for Kushina as she watched the small screen with various advertisements. Tsubaki sat behind Naruto and read a book. For once, the complex was quiet. However, it wasn't long before that quiet was broken as there came a knock on the door. Naruto, Kushina, and Tsubaki broke their gazes from their respective sources of entertainment. The knock on the door came twice. Tsubaki frowned. She could feel from the chakra signature outside that this person wasn't any of the Anbu residing in the apartment to help her keep watch over Naruto. No, this person was a Chunin. But how did they find this place? Tsubaki never gave out the information of the apartment complex. Hell, she didn't even give out this room number. Naruto-kun, stay here, Tsubaki whispered. Naruto grinned, but nodded while Tsubaki stood to her feet. She walked over to the door before discreetly taking out a kunai while she placed her hand on the doorknob. Tsubaki slowly opened the door. Greetings Tsubaki-san, came the kind voice, making Tsubaki narrow her eyes. What do you want, Mizuki? Tsubaki asked, opening the door only slightly to see the academy teacher and assistant Teruka Yumino in front of her face. The white-haired Chunin offered her a somewhat wide smile. Well, Naruto-san wasn't in today, so I just wanted to see how he was doing and give him his homework, Mizuki replied. Tsubaki frowned quickly before folding her arms. How did you find this apartment? She asked icily, making Mizuki shiver slightly. However, he quickly reined himself in just in time. Well, all teachers are given the locations of their students, Tsubaki. So we can better keep tabs on them, or if we need to notify their parents of any concerns, Mizuki replied. As soon as he finished that reply, Mizuki found a kunai to his throat. I will admit that we had history, Mizuki, but the only way you could know about this apartment is if Hokage-sama himself told you about it, Tsubaki glared. No, I'm serious, Tsubaki. All teachers are given the locations of their students. Uruka and Suzume-san have this location as well, Mizuki stammered, backing away from the sharp look in Tsubaki's eyes. He held his hands up in a non-threatening manner. Tsubaki tightened her grip over her kunai. Stay your hand, Tsubaki-san. He's telling the truth. I allowed him to pass. Tsubaki turned and took notice of the Anbu-disguised landlord. He gave a small nod to her before Tsubaki withdrew her kunai from Mizuki's throat. Well, this all could have been avoided if you had informed me of this beforehand, Tsubaki replied, standing up straight. She then took the books from Mizuki before turning around. There. You have done your duty, now leave, Tsubaki ordered. Mizuki just chuckled nervously before sighing. Tsubaki, I know how we did things wasn't the best and you have every right to be mad at me, but I'm just doing my best to look after Naruto-san, Mizuki said. Tsubaki snorted at his words. She didn't have the time to waste being angry with him. Too many other important things had to be done than dealing with him. Mizuki, if there is nothing more that I strongly dislike than anything else, then it would be your hypocritical nature. Please don't pretend to me that you seek the best for Naruto. I can see in your eyes the intense hatred that you hold for him. Now I can't detain you for merely expressing your feelings, but if you decide to outwardly express such, then I will not hesitate to kill you, Tsubaki said before swiftly closing the door. Mizuki's eyes narrowed at the door before he felt the presence of the Anbu behind him. You have finished your job, Chunin, now leave. Be advised that you will be watched closely from now on. Konoha can't afford your prejudice to get in the way of its future, the Anbu said from behind his mask. Mizuki's face formed into a snarl before he turned around swiftly, only to widen his eyes when the Anbu held his tanto to the teacher's throat. I thought I gave you an order, Chunin Mizuki. Leave now or be dealt with, the Anbu spoke with a sudden spike in chakra to prove his point. Mizuki wisely stayed his hand and walked away. The Anbu kept his eyes over the teacher's form before he disappeared out of view. The Anbu quickly vanished as well. Meanwhile, Tsubaki sighed as she quickly deposited the scrolls that Mizuki gave her onto the table. She would burn those later. Tsubaki had a feeling that homework and Naruto wouldn't go well together anyway. Naruto-kun, time for your medication, Tsubaki said, and she watched Naruto's smile twitch for a second before he appeared at her side. Tsubaki handed him the pill and Naruto popped it into his mouth. Within minutes, both Naruto and Kushina's eyes dropped slightly in exhaustion. Their glee was suddenly lessened as each took a more serious tone. Following this, Tsubaki gently led Naruto to his room and helped him with his pajamas. She watched Naruto crawl into bed. She then left his room and went to her own apartment number right next door. She walked inside before sighing as she sat on her bed. Tsubaki unstrapped her sword from her waist. As she went to set it down, she flinched. They say that paranoia was for the weak, but Tsubaki knew that it was always for the surviving. Standing back up, Tsubaki took half an hour to set up seals around her apartment at specific points of intersection before finally crawling to sleep. I can't have a mistake like that again. They caught me unaware that time. I let my guard down just because I was next to a seemingly harmless boy. I'm better than that, Tsubaki thought before she turned out the lights and closed her eyes. No doubt tomorrow would have its own challenges. Ones that Tsubaki knew would just test her patience. Next morning, Tsubaki laid her head back on a tree branch as she continued to watch Naruto through the window and in the academy room. The students seemed to be giving him a wider berth this time, and with good reason. Though that didn't stop most of them from whispering about him, but as long as none of them did anything outwardly, then Tsubaki figured that she had nothing to worry about. Though, as she suspected, Naruto, being mentally disturbed, was going to have a rough time learning anything theoretical from the academy. His shattered mind might comprehend a little, but probably only what he deemed as interesting. To think that the future of Konoha depended on this. As the day went forward and settled into late afternoon, Tsubaki sighed as the class began to give way for instruction into taijutsu. Tsubaki hopped out of her point of observation. Mizuki, Tsubaki called out, garnering the attention of the class. Mizuki looked up and sighed. With a shrug of his shoulders, he gave a defenseless smile. Tsubaki-san, to what do we owe the pleasure once again? Mizuki asked while Tsubaki folded her arms. I'm collecting Naruto-kun. That is all, Tsubaki replied. The children and clan heirs watched as Naruto stood to his feet. Why doesn't he have to take taijutsu while the rest of us do? How is that fair? Came the voice of the Inuzuka clan head's son. More than a few kids seemed to agree with him. I have no obligation to tell you, academy student, Tsubaki replied as Naruto came up to her without question. I bet he sucks. That's it, right? He just sucks. Though I don't blame him, I wouldn't want to fight me either, right Akamaru? Asked the clan heir, Kiba Inuzuka. In response to his question, Akamaru barked happily. As that's so. Well, a little piece of advice, Academy student. Keep the bravado and your death will be a quick one with no questions asked, Tsubaki replied. Soon the class began to roar in laughter while the Inuzuka male blushed and snarled to himself. Troublesome. You really are all talk, aren't you, Kiba? Why would you want to go and mess with someone like that anyway? Came the voice of the Nara clan head's son. The lazy look in his eyes easily took after his father. Shut up, Shikamaru. I could beat him easily. I bet even he knows it. Kiba snapped, making Shikamaru roll his eyes. Are you kidding? The guy laughs to himself constantly in class, though no one says anything to him, plus that creepy smile never leaves his face. It's like it's glued on there or something. Talk about creepy, came the voice of the Yamanaka clan head's daughter, Ino Yamanaka. The other students silently agreed. However, one was watching the blonde's retreating form. His eyes like a hawk tried to pierce into the blonde's body. All right, all of you quiet. Naruto-san has his reasons for not being here, so we will continue without him. Now then, Kiba-kun, since you seem so ready to fight, then how about some light sparring with Uchiha Sasuke? Mizuki asked. Kiba quickly winced before turning to see one Uchiha Sasuke standing to his feet. He quickly placed his hands in his pockets before walking to the mat. Kiba snorted before following. Of course he would have been more enthusiastic about all of this if all the damn girls were cheering for the Uchiha to kick his. How he wished he got the new kid for a partner. Meanwhile, back in the academy, Naruto followed Tsubaki to the letter while Tsubaki looked at the scroll on her hand. Alright, it says I'm to take you to 10. We both wait there and whoever is doing whatever they're doing will be with us soon, Tsubaki replied. Naruto didn't say anything. Kushina wants to do something. I'm tired of playing shugi against myself, Databane. I never lose. Kushina shouted before sighing as she leaned back to the sewer floor. How she formed a table and game pieces was anyone's guess. Naruto merely followed Tsubaki in delight. Soon Tsubaki found their room door and opened it. Standard classroom similar to Naruto's old one. Both walked inside. Naruto seated himself while Tsubaki leaned against the wall. As the clock ticked by, Tsubaki had the feeling that they were going to be waiting a while. Tsubaki turned an eye and looked at Naruto. She widened her eyes. Naruto-kun. Naruto, what's the matter? Tsubaki asked, suddenly taking herself up off the wall. Naruto trembled. His eyes wide with barely contained bloodlust. Kushina's hands clawed at the table in front of her. Each nails gave the screeching sound of wood splitting against nails. Kushina craned her neck to the side. The snapping of her neck muscles came. Naruto took his hands to his face and placed them on his temples. Keep him alive. Keep him close. We have to do it now. Now. We can't afford him to survive. So much blood. The sound of screaming. Come on. So close. So close. Datbeo. Too dark. Too much noise. Don't stop. Never stop. Ha 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 ha. Naruto suddenly fell back as he laughed uproariously. Tsubaki narrowed her eyes. She watched Naruto arch back painfully in disturbed laughter. Kuso, what is going on here? I made sure he took his medication. Is it wearing off because it's the end of the day? No, that shouldn't be possible. He should still have at least another 2 hours before he returns back to his normal self, but he's never done this. This is only similar to the time when he was overstressed from too many people looking at him back in the streets, Tsubaki thought in realization. She quickly picked Naruto up and into her arms. Naruto shook violently in her grasp, but Tsubaki kept a firm hold over his body. So this is what I am to work with. Understandable. Come. I wish not to have my time wasted. Tsubaki quickly turned around and frowned indefinitely. Tsubaki hated herself for being right so many times. Now it was all starting to make sense, especially now that this man was here. Shimura Danzo, Tsubaki said with a small glare as Naruto's broken laughter echoed in the background of her mind. A day for Tsubaki could never be simple, could it?